If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
Has anyone ever truly seen a demon, humanoid creature, tall pale being, alien, UFO, etc., with their own eyes? If so, can you share the story?
A tall, white humanoid creature was observed in the woods at night. I wondered if anyone has seen or had similar experiences. One night I was camping in the hammock, down a local woodland on my own, when I was woken up around 1 a.m. by a crashing through the trees coming from two separate directions diagonally in front on either side about 30 meters away. I stayed silent and didn't turn my light on in case it was another human, not wanting to give away my location, and after 5 to 10 seconds it stopped and went completely quiet again. I stayed awake for 30 to 45 minutes before going back to sleep. I woke up what felt like an hour later needing to go for a piss, grabbed my head torch, got up, walked about 5 meters from my hammock, and started urinating when I heard some rustling from the leaves about 10 meters in front of me. I turned on my head torch to see a tall, 7 to 8 feet, white/gray, humanoid-like creature crouched behind the tree on all fours, slowly standing up from behind the tree. It had no face or genitals and had indents where the eyes should be. I remember not being scared and asked it, "Are you friendly?" From this point on, I don't remember anything and woke up in the morning in my sleeping bag back in the hammock with it unzipped and my head torch still by my side. I felt a deep sadness and a strong sense of misery emanating from the creature. I've seen photos of crawlers, and they looked pretty similar but with no face or eyes. I have had other experiences, but normally my sixth sense is going crazy and I'm shit scared, which didn't seem to happen this time. Okay, finally I get to tell this, but back in 2008 I was shooting a video project for college with other students. We were camping outside and sleeping in a rural Colombian home. We were not drinking or anything, the teacher was there with us, and we were filming at night. I took a break and sat around the fire, and I just caught something on the side between the woods. It was in my periphery, but the tall, skinny, long, humanoid white skin stood out behind the dark trees. I gasped, "We have a gorilla problem," so my rational brain went right away to that, even though it didn't explain the figure, but before I even said anything, a friend said, "You guys saw that, right?" We all went just completely quiet, grabbed our stuff, got inside the house, and just jammed everyone there. Nobody was sleeping outside that night. We asked the people that worked there the next morning, and they just laughed and said, "Yeah, they hang around, just don't follow." So yeah, after all this year, I still think about that bright silhouette. A very weird encounter with a morphing humanoid. Location, Laurel Mountain, near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Date, January 28, 2011. Time, night. A young lady and a friend had a remarkable experience. The lady and her friend had been visiting the former cabin in the area and were in the driveway of the cabin and getting ready to drive away when suddenly the vehicle would not budge, no matter how much force the driver applied to the pedal. Looking up, the witnesses spotted what appeared to be a hovering triangular-shaped craft over the trees. The craft had lights at each apex and began to maneuver around. As they watched, something stunning occurred. The triangle then seemed to change shape. It appeared to grow wings and transform itself into what the main witness described as a dragon or a demon. According to the main witness, this creature or object flew around for a long time. There appears to be a sort of time displacement or missing time since the witness thought it was 6 hours at least, while her companion appeared to have fallen asleep. Now at this point the dragon or demon type creature again transformed itself into a large, glowing, human-like figure, which fell approximately 70 feet and landed on top of the cabin. It turned around and then looked straight at the witness. At this point it was about 40 feet away, and she noticed that it was wearing dark clothing. It then disappeared in plain sight of the witness. During the encounter, the witness reported seeing numerous other humanoid figures, all dressed in black, that ran around the mountain and the car and sometimes approached her location. It seemed to her that they were performing some kind of operation on the mountain. Eventually she saw most of the figures leave up the mountain but did not see the triangular craft again. In the morning, once her friend had awoken, she drove home. I'm a farmer. I was going to my grandparents' place, which was less than 2 kilometers away. Furthermore, I was with my 2 sisters on a 4-wheeler. We were going through our pasture when we noticed something on our rock pile in the middle of the field. We thought it was maybe a baby cow that fell and couldn't get up. My sister said maybe it's our uncle who always looks after the cows and checks the fields. It was something just sitting on our rock pile but sitting like Spider-Man, crouched down. It didn't see us at first. It was looking on our pasture, which I assume it was looking at gophers. We never had any missing cows or calves, but there were a ton of gophers all over, and it was at the spot where we had the most gophers, the pile of rocks that I used to call Gopher City. I was a kid, and as soon as it saw us, it slowly stood up but kept its gaze on us. Like in a movie. Then it just ran straight for us. It ran as hard as it could. I swear it was putting in as much effort as an Olympic runner. But its long-ass arms were not touching the ground. It was running like the RoboCop in the older films. Its arms were swaying up and down so fast I could tell he meant serious business. We stopped our four-wheeler, and I jumped in the driver's seat and just took off back home. He continued to chase us, but I refused to look at him. My sisters were screaming that it was still coming, but for some unknown reason I just said, "Don't look at it." Remind you, I was the youngest there. My two sisters were older than me. I was about 13 at the time. We drove straight home, and I drove the ATV onto our porch. That's how scared I was. We all ran inside screaming, and my cousin, who was there at the time, immediately started crying just seeing how scared we were. We weren't crying, just scared. We called all our family asking if they had seen anything, and no one had. But my grandma, whose place we were driving to, said she'd seen something run in front of her house really fast. That's it. I don't care if anyone believes me, I just want people to be safe in the woods. Something is out there. Something that has no lore, like Bigfoot. Something that wanted me and my sisters for God knows why. But I will never be the same. I had nightmares for so long about its long-ass arms coming into my room. It was a long-armed, skinny, gray being. It was super skinny, all gray. I don't remember the fingers, so I don't think they were long. Its head, though, did seem weird. It was robotic. Like from the game Destiny, its cheekbones would go inwards, not outwards. Also, this is the most stupid part, but its head had a natural crown shape, like pointy things going up like a crown, which made no sense. That's the thing about what we saw. It made absolutely no sense at all, but I know it was real. It's like seeing a color that doesn't exist, it just makes no sense at all, but it's always there in your head. Encounter with an entity. I'm hoping to get some feedback on something unusual I experienced a few years ago. I've always been a bit skeptical of paranormal phenomena, but this encounter has stayed with me. I want to share what happened and see if anyone else has had a similar experience or can offer insights. So, this happened when I was 16. It was around 7 to 8 p.m., and I was in my fully lit bedroom, scrolling through Instagram. I was awake and fully aware of my surroundings when suddenly, my alarm clock turned on by itself and started playing Cake by the Ocean. Random detail, I know. I remember feeling a bit uneasy at that moment, like something was off in the room, like I wasn't alone. I looked up, and there, right next to my alarm clock, was what I can only describe as a humanoid entity. It wasn't solid, but rather, it seemed to be made of light. The light was bending in a way that formed the shape of a person, arms, legs, head, and torso, but no fine features. It was like a distortion of light, kind of like a heat mirage. The room also seemed a little brighter than normal, almost like the entity was somehow affecting the electricity or the environment. I remember feeling terrified but also knowing that whatever it was there, clear as day. My eyes started watering, and I couldn't speak. I ended up slowly backing out of the room, closing the door, and running upstairs to get my dad. When we went back down, it was gone. I've never experienced anything like this since. I know some might chalk it up to a vivid imagination or something psychological, but it felt real. My mom also mentioned that I had an imaginary friend when I was little, and she said a psychic once even mentioned it. That has always stuck with me, and now I'm wondering if there's any connection to what I saw years later. I'm curious if anyone else has had similar encounters with light-based or energy entities, or if you have any insights into what I might have experienced. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Pale white humanoid-like creature. So I'm located in Akron, Ohio, USA. This happened in maybe 2022 or 2023, I can't exactly remember the year. I had just gotten home from working late one night. I used to test gas stations and would work late into the night most times. I got home around 2:45 to 3 a.m. and let my dogs out to go potty, and when I was standing there, I got the overwhelming sensation to peek around the corner of my house towards my neighbors. Consequently, I cautiously glanced around the side of my house and into my neighbor's backyard, where I encountered something that profoundly unsettled me, evoking the most intense fear I have ever felt. So for context, it was late into the night and a dark night. Whether it was a crescent moon or a new moon, the night was extremely dark. So I had stepped back out with my dogs to get my stuff out of my work truck, and while they did their business, I set my stuff inside the side door of my house and walked back outside to them. After they finished up, I let them back inside, but before I could follow them, I got such an overwhelming feeling that I had to look around the corner of my house to my neighbors. I didn't know why, but I felt compelled to do it, so I just barely peeked my head around and saw this creature standing inside my neighbor's fenced-in backyard. It was standing at the back of the yard facing towards the woods behind our houses, so it had its back towards my neighbor's house, and I was looking at its side profile. It stood maybe 6 to 7 feet tall, with pale white skin that was bright like a light was shining on it, but again, it was pitch black outside. I could see it perfectly, like I had shined a flashlight on it. It was very human-like, except it had no clothes on and was muscular but smooth. Sorry if it's inappropriate, but it's necessary for the description. I could see it from head to toe, and it had no genitalia. Just a smooth body, bright pale skin, and was just standing there, staring into the woods. As I was staring at this in just absolute disbelief and shock at what I was seeing, while still hiding behind my house essentially, it snapped its head towards me and stared directly at me. I didn't get any thoughts in my head besides run. In a full panic, I ran inside my house, slammed the door behind me, and locked it, just waiting for whatever this creature was to come and get me. I have never felt fear like I did in that moment. I truly thought it would come get me and take me or kill me. I have never seen anything like that before or since. So in summary, it was 6 to 7 feet tall, with bright, pale white skin and a muscular but smooth body. Completely naked but no clear genitalia. It stood staring into the woods inside the fenced-in backyard at the edge of the yard/fence. Didn't make any movements besides to snap its face towards me. The closest thing I can find online to what it reminds me of is the creature from Prometheus, but it's still not the same at all. If anyone has any ideas or thoughts, I'm all ears. I would love to know what this was. Thanks. Not a humanoid per se, but an odd encounter with a man. I know this isn't the typical humanoid encounter, but I found it extremely interesting and thought-provoking. Granted, the person in this story presented himself as a human, but he might not have been one, i.e., demon, possessed human, alien, etc. Then again, he could have been an unknown humanoid of some sort. Take it for what it's worth. What do you think? My brother shared with me a true story of an extremely odd, evil, and clairvoyant man that he and his friends encountered a few years back in Jacksonville, Florida. My brother and his buddies were drinking at a bar when a strange man approached them. My brother described that at first he felt merely perturbed by the presence of this man because he looked like a hanger-on who was trying to butt into the conversation. He said this person was trying to be jovial, laughing as if he knew what the guys were talking about and trying to slide into the group. His appearance was more of a nuisance than anything else at this point, and none of the guys seemed interested in talking to this stranger, but he managed to make his way into their circle. My brother said that out of nowhere the mood of this stranger changed completely, and so did the subject matter, as he asked my brother's friend, "If I could give you anything, what would it be?" At first, the friend laughed it off, but the stranger let it be known by his tone that he was completely serious, and he asked him again, "If I could give you anything?" The friend replied something like, "I don't know, man. Money and a really hot wife." Well, things got really weird when the stranger admitted he could do them for him in exchange for his soul. He then started openly sharing the details of his demon possession, specifically by the demon Beelzebub, and how it was his duty to find a human willing to sacrifice his soul, one person every year or something like that. My brother noticed that at some point, the stranger's eyes became blackened, and an indescribable evil aura surrounded him. The guys were all getting freaked out, but they still thought that this guy was probably just making it all up. The stranger wanted to prove his ability, so he asked the person to ask him any question about himself, and he could answer it. So, my brother's friend asked, "Okay, what is my mom's name?" And the demon man answered, "Kelly with an I." This was unquestionably accurate. At this point, being all completely freaked out, the guys decided to get the heck out of there. What stands out most to my brother is the incredibly evil, creepy, inexplicable feeling that he and his friends all witnessed firsthand. I was deeply impressed by this story and wanted to share it with others. The problem is it is very creepy to retell, as I don't even like mentioning that demon's name. My terrifying encounter with a demon. When I was 14, I had a strange encounter that still puzzles me to this day. On the weekends I'd sometimes go to my mother's place. My parents were divorced by this time. The house she lived in was converted into several small apartments. It was a creepy old farmhouse. The house was at least 150, maybe 200 years old. My mom told me off and on of strange sounds she'd been hearing and seeing things in the corner of her eyes and feeling like she was being watched. This one particular evening when I spent the night, I brought my N64 because my mom would go to bed early and I'd still be up for a few more hours. I still remember to this day what game I was playing, WWF No Mercy. I was sitting Indian style on the floor playing the story mode. I just finished a mission in the game and set down the controller to the left of me, behind me. Directly behind me was a recliner. I'll never forget what I saw next. I went to grab the controller and saw what appeared to be a hoof, like aces, next to the controller on the floor. Insects and blood were coming out of the sliver that separated the hoof. I thought to myself, how strange. I slowly glanced up, and this demonic figure was staring back at me. It leaned down towards me, brought its face close to mine, and grinned with the most evil smile. The eyes are black, the face is red, and it's a one-winged creature. Blood was dripping from its teeth. It was so surreal I immediately went into a panic attack and blacked out. I learned later it was the fight or flight response. Several seconds later, I came to lie on the floor and could barely move. The demonic figure in the chair was laughing at me, seemingly draining my fear and energy. I lost all strength. I did all I could to crawl to my mom's room and wake her up. After I woke her up, we talked, and she believed me. She told me she'd also seen the same thing earlier that week but didn't want to scare me. I remain uncertain about its meaning and continue to contemplate it to this day. I have no doubt demons and angels are real, and believe me, the last thing you ever want to encounter is a demon smiling in your face. My mother and her then boyfriend recall seeing this thing at my grandfather's house prior to moving to her farmhouse apartment. While they were lying in bed, my mother smelled sulfur, and then they saw this demonic thing walk into their bedroom, turn its head towards them, and let out a smile. It then disappeared. My grandfather acknowledged this thing was around, but it didn't bother him as he ignored it. He's passed on since then. It was an open secret within my family that something dwelled on the land. This only proved it. I don't care if you believe me or not, but when 3 people see the same thing on 2 separate occasions, and when 4 people acknowledge it, either we're all crazy or something was wrong with that old farmhouse and my grandfather's house. My father had an experience involving a white-eyed demon. First off, I'd like to explain that my father is definitely not a believer in the paranormal and would often scoff at the idea of an afterlife or anything demonic. He's a keen believer in fear the living, not the dead. However, this is something that has definitely changed the man I've known as a real-life Agent Scully to an almost fearful shell. For some further backstory, my parents are both successful businesspeople and live in a large house that has its own grounds and is encased within large 10-foot tall fences and an electronic gate, and there is practically no way of getting into the property without setting off some type of alarm or hurting yourself. This is relevant to the story. My mother was away on business, and my sister was staying at her friend's. I had already moved out at this point, and my dad was enjoying some much appreciated peace and quiet in the back living room when the door was knocked continuously. He explained that the knock was relentless but not frantic, like a constant beat, and a feeling of dread overcame him. Upon approaching the door, he said that the knocking stopped when he was about a foot away from the doorway, which was odd, as the front door is made of thick wood, and it's impossible to hear/see anyone behind it. After opening it, he said he was surprised to see a boy about 14 years old standing motionless on the top step of the porch. In the description, he said that the boy was wearing a nondescript hoodie, green cargo shorts, trainers, and gray socks. His hair was perfectly brushed to a side parting, and his skin was pale. Almost immediately the boy said, "I'm lost, can I come inside?" His stomach dropped and filled with terror, yet he found himself almost paralyzed. The boy continued, "I am cold and lost. I am frightened," which my father found even more odd as this happened only last week, on the hottest day in the UK since 1976. "No," my dad answered, almost apologetically. "Please, I am only a boy. I am cold." The boy continued, now moving his head up slightly to reveal completely white eyes. At this point, my dad says he retched and felt completely hypnotized by the gaze of the being before him and that he could hear voices communicating with him, but without talking. He attempted to shut the door when the boy continued with, "Neil, your behavior is abhorrent. Open the door, Neil, let me in, Neil. You are alone." My father slammed the door and spent the night sitting in terror, alone in the living room. He said that every so often, the window, which was located behind his armchair in the lounge, a floor-to-ceiling one that covered the entire wall, was knocked upon, and he forced himself not to look. I was told this yesterday and am thoroughly concerned about his experience. I've since found out about the black-eyed children, which apparently do similar types of things. However, my father said his eyes were white, ice white. His voice was neither old nor young, had no accent, and was oddly accretive for such a young boy. I don't know what to make of it. My dad has never been on medication, he's not a liar, and he's definitely not a believer in any of this paranormal bollocks, as he calls it. I'm sitting in the living room of my parents' house as I've written this, the large window behind me. Absolutely terrified that we'll be visited again. Any suggestions? Does anyone actually know what's happening here? So as someone who has personally witnessed the orbs firsthand on multiple occasions, first beginning in October of 2023, I've been trying to follow this stuff for the past couple of years. It's gotten to the point where I want to know what's going on so badly that I usually can't even sleep anymore because my OCD ADHD brain won't stop obsessing over the phenomenon and the truth behind it. I've always kept an open mind, but my entire life, I've always believed in science and physics to explain how our world works. This whole UFO/NHI thing has become so muddied and convoluted with different explanations for the phenomena that it's become impossible to determine what's fact and what's misinformation. I've witnessed the orbs on 4 different occasions. I witnessed one teleport right in front of me. I've seen what appeared to be the stars falling from the sky. It looked almost like meteors being projected on a planetarium sky, except it was the actual night sky. I've seen drones shooting orbs out of their sides repeatedly for hours on end. Most of those sightings were around December 14th through now. There's most certainly something happening in the skies. There are so many different stories out there that have become popular as being difficult to disprove or witnessed and corroborated by groups of people. Stories that are widely believed, like Chris Bledsoe, who can apparently summon these orbs reliably. The thing is, everyone seems to have different experiences and explanations for what the phenomena are. People have seen the orbs transform into drones. Others associate them with the short grays or the tall grays. Chris Bledsoe claims he saw short beings with glowing red eyes in the woods and then disappeared from his group for several hours before returning later that night with amnesia. They then fled the campsite and said the orbs followed them home, where he then encountered short, childlike humanoids that sparkled and levitated, who cured him of his Crohn's disease. Some people associate the orbs with the mantids. Some claim to see the blonde, Norwegian-looking humans. Some say they're angels. Others say they're the fallen angels or Nephilim. Some say they're demons. Some say they're jinn. Some say they're the Anunnaki. It seems that everyone sees something different. Furthermore, it's widely believed that skeptics can't witness the phenomenon. So my question is, does anyone have any real proof or insight as to WTF is happening with these orbs? I grew up with a very normal life that, up until a few years ago, never experienced any supernatural activity. My world was nice and boring and predictable. Things made sense and were provable through science. Things obeyed the laws of physics. It seems that's not the case anymore. It's very difficult to comprehend. Now there are weird shape-shifting orbs and other light phenomena in the skies. There are videos that look like ducking dementors from Harry Potter flying around. There's some weird fog that's taken over the world. There's something interfering with the flow of electricity that's making lights flicker at random. Orbs shape-shifting into drones that then proceed to shoot more orbs out. I need answers. Humanoid/demon encounter. My boyfriend at the time and I went to Key West in 2014 for vacation back in my junior year of college. While bar hopping, we visited the Coyote Ugly bar on the main strip. I ended up sitting next to this very thin, dark-haired woman. I asked her if it's alright if I sat there. She turned her head in an incredibly slow manner. She nods her head up and down equally slowly. I don't think anything of it. My boyfriend and I place our drink order and engage in conversation for a moment. I'm facing away from the woman, and I feel her tap on my shoulder. So I turn around, and she's raising her glass to cheer. I should explain what she looks like, because it's a lot like what I imagine a demon wearing human skin would look like: bone-thin, sallow skin, stringy straight black hair with sharp cheekbones and nose. Her eyes were black, I mean huge black pupils that didn't blink, they looked like static. She cheers me and opens her mouth to smile, and her gums are gray, her teeth are gray and small, and I remember immediately having this overwhelming feeling that she wanted to eat my skin. I'm in panic mode at this point and whip my head back to my boyfriend. He's seen this woman now too, and he grabs me by my arm to get us to move to the back of the room as quickly as possible. I'm basically cowering, I know, super brave. I always loved reading about demons, and possibly faced with one, I'm jello, facing the back wall. I turn to start making our way out to the street, and the woman has got her head completely cranked around to stare at me from the bar. I feel her staring at me as we leave, and I haul us back to the hotel. She didn't say a single word throughout the entire encounter. I always regretted not asking her to speak. I will say, my boyfriend and I talked about it after and considered the gray teeth and mouth and general craziness possibly due to drugs. But I've seen my fair share of drug addicts, even had one try to kidnap me, so I ducking no crazy, and this was not the same. I think about this episode pretty often even years later. That feeling of encountering something soulless that wanted to harm me has never diminished. Anyone else similar? At the beginning of the modern age of ufology in the late 1940s, many UFO researchers refused to take humanoid reports seriously. When they finally did begin to research them, humanoid encounters were considered rare events. But now many researchers are reversing their opinion. There are now many thousands of cases on record, and given that most people don't report their encounters with humanoids to UFO reporting agencies, the number is likely much higher than that. Cases go back more than 100 years and come from all over the world. This episode presents 12 lesser-known cases, starting from 1940 up to 2013, each involving different types of humanoids. Everything we know about extraterrestrials comes from the people who have seen them. It's time that we take these reports seriously, because there are a lot of them. All humanoids in glowing metallic outfits. One evening in the early 1940s, Vicente Pedone, a police sergeant from Buenos Aires, Argentina, was stationed in Oriente with his partner when a young man who lived in the area rushed into the station to report that an aircraft had crashed into the mountains several kilometers away. The three men rushed to the location to discover something very different. It was a landed saucer-shaped craft, and standing around it were several tall humanoids. After a short observation, the men became frightened and fled the area. Returning to the site the next day, the man who had first seen the object says he found burned vegetation where the craft had landed. The clouded craft. One evening in 1952, bricklayer Felix Fies and several of his co-workers were at the airport in Nimes-Courbessac, France, when a small, odd-looking cloud began to zoom toward them much faster than a cloud could move and at low elevation. When it came alongside them, they were shocked to see that within the cloud was a metallic cylinder-shaped craft with large windows. And through the windows they could see 5 or 6 men wearing jumpsuits, helmets, and goggles moving around inside it. The object was in view for only a few seconds before it again assumed the appearance of a strange cloud and zipped off. Researchers later learned there were several other witnesses. A UFO drive-by with humanoids. One evening in October 1957, a married couple drove through the remote Veiled Moos, known as the Wild Bog, the largest raised bog in Europe. Both simultaneously observed a brilliant light moving at ground level in a field, coming right toward them. Soon it approached to within only a few hundred feet, and the couple were shocked to see that it was a very strange craft with a glowing green, transparent dome on top. Inside the dome, side by side, sat 2 human-looking uniformed men. The husband slowed down and wanted to investigate, but his wife became frightened and insisted upon leaving the area. The husband drove off slowly, watching through his rearview mirror as the craft moved off. I'm shocked and terrified. I saw the scariest apparition ever in my friend's house. Does this mean my friend has demons/ghosts after him? Or in his home? This is going to be a bit long and I'm still pretty much shaken, so forgive me if I'm not clear, but I will try my best. Okay, so first a little background. 2 days ago my friend was brought to the emergency room because he tried to kill himself. I helped him as well as I could. I stayed behind in his place and brought him some stuff he needed to the hospital the next day. One important detail is that the apartment has wooden floors and it creaks like crazy because it was very unprofessionally done. This will be important later on. One night ago I slept on the couch because the bed was kind of messy and nothing happened. The apartment is somewhat large, 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a separate living room. Tonight I tidied the bed in his room, and I slept at the very same spot he sleeps at every day and I didn't know but I was in for the nastiest, scariest thing/experience I've ever had. Night falls and I go to sleep. At first I seem to sleep just fine, but then this cold wind comes from nowhere, blowing on my back. I am very sleepy, so I sleep again. Then I hear the sound of somebody in the room and breathing close to me. I wake up and bolt to one of the housemates' rooms and say, I think somebody is in the house. I heard someone walking and breathing in the room and there was wind, so maybe somebody got through a door/window. At first people think I'm totally just nuts, but then we all hear noises in the kitchen and see some glimpses of something in there. This room where the other people were has a limited view of the kitchen to the corridor, but you can see if people enter or exit. There's no way out of the kitchen. To get to the front or back doors, you need to exit the kitchen. One thing to note is that right at this time we thought some type of burglary was going on. But it wasn't. There are 3 people in the room, me, one roommate who's really tall, like 6 feet 6 in, 1.98 meters, his name is Jay, and another friend. Both were playing games till before that. It was 4 a.m. or so and pitch ducking black. Jay goes to stand right at the door of the room because he is by far the strongest and tallest of us all, the other guy in the back trying to use the phone, and me trying to see what's there from behind Jay. The tall guy. We shout stuff like go away. We are calling the police. Get out. We hear nothing back, we see nothing yet. Meanwhile, we are calling emergency, but the call doesn't connect or drops right after connection. Once it did work, but the person on the line thought we needed an ambulance. WTF? We only know there's someone in the kitchen and we realize this person has a knife now if he didn't have one before. It felt like hours, but it all lasted only a couple of minutes. I and Jay have a view of the open doorway that leads to the kitchen. After the noise stops, we see a tower of a ducking man walk and stop at the doorframe, staring at us. We hold the door in between, ready to close. But we want to keep an eye on it. Now we are all thinking we are going to die. My heart felt like it was going to blow up. The thing stands there staring at us. It felt like hours, but I'm sure it wasn't more than a couple of seconds, and it's really dark, but we see it wearing a big, thick jacket/sweater with a hoodie. It walks towards us a couple of steps, the floor stops creaking, and it disappears before we even shut the door right in front of our eyes. Jay and I saw it disappear, and we are just paralyzed and mind-ducked. We close the door anyway, but now the house is silent. No doors creaking, no floors, no windows, nothing making noise anymore. From one moment to the next, there was nothing to be found. The hallways to the kitchen had enough light that we could see, and it was clear that the very large man/thing had just vanished. I was nearly passing out and had to sit down. We needed a moment to collect ourselves, and then we tried to turn the lights on, but it seemed that the power was out in some areas, so we went to this central thingy and pushed these little buttons on again. We lit the house and looked for signs that it was a person. We didn't find any signs that a person had been there. We were just really confused and had to explain it to the second guy who was on the phone, because he didn't see it. They looked just like people, but they weren't. On the night of December 18, 1977, Bruno Nygaard was walking along a dirt road toward his home in the small, isolated rural village of Sahavara, Sweden. Ahead of him, he was puzzled to see what initially appeared to be two children. Strangely, they appeared to be sitting on a floating platform. As the strange craft and figures approached, the two little beings hopped off and began to walk alongside it, picking up things off the ground. Suddenly they seemed to see Bruno. Apparently startled by his appearance, the two little men hopped back onto their craft, which turned around, headed towards the field, and disappeared behind the trees. It was not human. On the evening of August 7, 1979, co-workers and friends Liz and Ruth left a company bridal shower and drove along a remote country highway near Duluth, Minnesota. Both ladies instantly became puzzled by what appeared to be three children playing in the middle of the road ahead of them. They drove closer and became even more mystified when two of the short figures seemed to float or glide off the road. But one remained standing in the road facing them, blocking the road. Driving up to the figure and coming to a stop, they were shocked to see that it wasn't a child. Instead, it was a short figure with a bald head, large dark eyes, and gray skin. Neither of them had heard of gray aliens and didn't know what they were looking at. For the next 10 minutes, the strange figure stared at them. Finally, fear overcame their shock, and they drove off. Following the encounter, both women were somewhat traumatized, and the dash lights on the car never worked again. This was one of an intense wave of encounters that struck the area. Possible demonic presence? Help. I have always had a connection to the supernatural, an extra sense, if you will. I've never really had any weird experiences apart from seeing orbs and flashing lights until after my maternal grandmother died in 2019. Thereafter, I divorced my husband and moved into my first apartment on my own. It was fairly new and in a nice area, so I wasn't concerned about living as a single mom. My anxiety and depression were rather high during this period, and I honestly felt that a demon was trying to possess me. I have talked to several people about this, but they all tell me I must have been sleeping. It did start with dreams. Or sleep paralysis. Or whatever you want to call it. At first the shadows on my wall would start moving just as I would be trying to fall asleep, and I would go into a panic. Then the shadows began to touch me, poke me. Their touch was electric, making my whole body tense and all my muscles spasm. After a month of this happening 3 to 4 times a week, I started seeing and feeling things while I was awake too. I would see a small creature crawling on top of my cabinets out of the corner of my eye or feel like someone was watching me to the point of not moving. There were times when I fell asleep on my living room couch because I was too scared to walk past the kitchen to my bedroom, knowing something was there. I would have random bruises appear on my body, especially on my chest and back. Then the intensity of my dreams increased as my stress and anxiety worsened. I began to feel like the shadows were actually trying to possess me, and at points my body would move in ways that I know I didn't tell it to. Things began to get better in April of 2020, and the feelings died down, but when I moved to a different house, this time not by myself, in June of 2020, they started again. Now I probably only have an episode every 2 to 3 months, but it gets significantly worse every time, and I'm quite honestly scared. To shorten the story, I will focus on the most recent episode, But please understand that there have been other episodes of varying degrees of seriousness in between. My paternal grandmother passed away in March 2020, and she had a very strong connection to the energy of the world. Just a couple weeks ago I started feeling very depressed for no reason, even wanting to end my life. This is not me, this has never been something I wanted to do. I am a very goal-driven person, and so giving up just isn't in my vocabulary, so these thoughts were very concerning to me. Recently, as I was trying to fall asleep, I began to feel the touch of the shadows again. They wrapped around my legs, and I could feel hot breath on my neck. Frozen in fear, trembling and shaking, I closed my eyes tight. Whatever was behind me whispered, "I am coming for you, and I will get you." I was so scared, but I did everything I could to open my eyes. Sometimes if I open my eyes, it helps snap me out of the episode. This time, I saw an older woman with stringy blonde hair and dark eyes. Her mouth was agape, as if she were attempting to communicate with me, but I was unable to hear her. She came closer, and I could tell it was my paternal grandmother. As soon as I realized it was her, I felt the shadowy presence go away. What makes all this even creepier, my sister, who has also had a connection to spirits, had almost the same exact thing happen to her the same night. Do you guys think this could be a demon trying to wear me down, or do you think it's evidence of psychosis? 9-foot-tall humanoids. In early 1980, a massive wave of UFO activity occurred in the rural area on the outskirts of Algeciras, Spain. People reported seeing glowing objects zipping across the sky, hovering, sending down beams of light, and more. Then on February 12, 1980, a married couple saw the lights from a friend's home and decided to drive towards them and investigate. They came upon a group of 40 witnesses watching the objects from a distance. 3 young men joined the couple, and they drove up to the objects, at which point one of them landed a few hundred feet away. To their shock, 9-foot-tall, uniformed humanoids exited the craft, walking around it. Suddenly the strange figures began to approach the witnesses. The witnesses fled in their car, and to their horror, the humanoids chased them. The next night, another witness, a night watchman, reported a frightening humanoid encounter. Miniature UFO and humanoid. It was a sunny spring day in 1984 as a young boy walked through a forested field near his home in Vancouver, Washington. To his amazement, he saw something shiny and metallic sitting in the field ahead of him. Approaching it, he was astonished to see that it was a 3-foot-wide flying saucer with a transparent dome on top, and inside the dome was a little man sitting on a seat, holding a control lever. Intrigued and ever curious, the boy grabbed the tiny craft. The little man cringed in fear but composed himself and caused the craft to emit a buzzing noise. Instantly, the craft pulled free of the boy's grip and took off into the blue sky. Demon encounter. About 8 or so years ago, when I was around 14, I was lying in my bunk bed on the top bunk. I was on my phone and facing my TV. I saw movement in my peripherals and looked. I looked at a demon. It was a woman. It was hard to describe her features because I only looked at her for about a second while frozen before hiding under my pillow and screaming for my brother to wake up. Now what's really weird is this demon was moving her head in a wave-like pattern really fast. It makes me super scared to think about for some reason, and when I make the movements with my head, it just sends shivers down my spine. She was moving her head like that so fast. Just in a wave like a figure 8 with her head. Just moving her head, looking at me. What could that movement be? I got some more stories too. This story was my first encounter, but I sometimes wish I had just imagined it. But let me make this clear, it was very, very real and made me think I was going to have schizophrenia or something. On that note, last summer I was working in my office. I fell into this trance-like state, which I do when I see odd things happen. There have been 2 other times I fell into this trance and saw some weird, other dimensional, shit. Anyways, I see a flash of light at my feet, and I look down and see a rodent. It was no species on this planet. It looks like a chipmunk but is too small and not a chipmunk. It was jumping, but not normally. It was high energy arcs of jumping, which defied gravity with how fast and powerful the leaps were. I saw the rodent for probably less than a second before it jumped through a wall and disappeared. It went under my desk and jumped and literally disappeared, jumping through a wall. I saw a very tall being 5 years ago, and it still haunts me. So this is going to be a long one, but I would really appreciate it if anyone could tell me what this is, and I'm going to give you guys all the information I can to help people give me some sort of answer if there is one. I assure you that I am not making this up or that I am crazy. In November 2019, when I was 17 years old, my mom sent me to a troubled teen program. To be exact, she sent me to Columbus Girls Academy's Teen Challenge. It was a very Pentecostal atmosphere. Before being sent there, I had been using psychedelics, which is why my mom decided to send me away. I had started to see through the veil during that time. There were several different dorms on the campus, and I was assigned to Dorm D. The campus is on part of the land of the Trail of Tears. One night in my dorm room, I slept on top of the bunk. I heard a loud noise in the bathroom, and I sat up in bed. I was not dreaming or experiencing sleep paralysis. When I sat up, I saw it was 3 a.m. on the dot. We weren't allowed to get out of bed at night, use the bathroom, or do anything without going to get a staff member. There were lots of rules, so I was really wondering what was going on here. Next thing I know, as I'm sitting up, I see a tall woman, probably 7 or 8 feet tall, walk out of the bathroom. Her skin was pale, almost grayish, and she had long black hair that kind of covered her face, and she wore a long-sleeved white nightgown. Her walking style resembled that of someone who was weeping. I could feel sadness and moping coming off of her. I watched her walk over to another girl's bunk, and she was so tall that she had to lean down to see this girl's face, and she either breathed something into this girl's mouth or sucked something out, I don't really know. Then she walked over to another girl in the dorm and did the same thing. After that, she sat under the window in our dorm, rested her head on her legs, and started weeping. Then she got up and left. The entire time I felt uneasy, and I kept repeating Jesus' name in my head, and it's like she didn't even acknowledge my existence. The 2 girls with whom she interacted developed mental tendencies and exhibited out-of-character behaviors. I never really told any of the other girls because I didn't want to sound crazy, but I knew I wasn't crazy when the girl I shared a bunk with, she was on the bottom bunk, asked me the next morning if I had seen anything weird that night. I admitted to her what I saw, and she confirmed that she saw the same thing. After I left the program, girls reached out to me and told me they were tormented with dreams and seeing the same being. My question is, what was this? The only time I've seen a white human figure in my basement. So I'm 23 now, this happened 2 years ago. It was maybe 11 p.m. I can't remember the exact day, but this brings chills down my spine every time I think about it. I've only told 2 people in my life. I'm not into paranormal stuff at all. I know it's odd that I'm sharing here, but I'm just looking for any insight into what I experienced. I'll give you a basic layout of my basement, it helps explain what happened. There's a post to the right of my couch and a wall to the left. The only way to head to the washroom is to walk around the post towards the back of the couch and down the left side behind the wall. This is relative to the couch facing forward. One night I had to use the restroom, and as I was walking towards the bathroom, I had this really strange feeling to just turn around, which never happens. As I turned my head, all I could see was this human figure made of just light, standing on the other side of the couch. Now, this light wasn't bright or anything, my lights were on, and it kind of just matched the room's light, so I had a good look at it. I couldn't see through it, it was just there, standing and staring at me for at least 2 to 3 seconds. I felt nothing, my heart didn't race, I was just fascinated, but it seemed like it was caught off guard by the fact that I was staring directly at it, so it ran and sprinted towards the opposite side of the room, and as soon as it passed behind the post, it completely disappeared. The experience was the only time I've ever seen anything like that in my life, and I've never had any paranormal encounters in my life besides that. It was odd because it was like another person was in my house just curiously looking at me. It didn't have a face, the best way I can describe it was a human form made of pure white light, but besides that, it seemed more scared of me than I was of it. It wasn't until it disappeared that I felt this surge of WTF just happened. I started to understand the weight of what I just saw. I was dead sober, I don't drink or smoke. My house is only 6 years old at the time, and no one lived in it before. I don't have any dead relatives either. Is there anyone who might know what that could have been or maybe experienced something exactly like it? It was both a terrifying and crazy experience. 6 amazing humanoid encounters. Soldiers or aliens. In July of 1940, a 15-year-old boy from Kongstisted, Denmark, went to complete his chore of watering his cattle when he was confronted by 3 figures wearing strange jumpsuits and helmets with faceplates. To his surprise, they walked up to a landed, disc-shaped craft and entered inside it without opening any doorway. The craft took off with a quiet whooshing sound. He thought they might be German soldiers, but later as an adult, he heard about UFOs and realized he may have encountered ETs. The old thin alien. One day in the summer of 1951, 3 people went to attend a play in Beausoleil, Alpes-Maritimes, France. Approaching the theater, they were amazed to observe a small, transparent craft low in the sky, and inside it was an old, thin man with a beard, sitting in a seat inside the craft, leaning forward and watching the play. The witnesses tried to alert the audience, but the craft quickly darted away with a soft whistling noise. Landing in Humanoids in Bozeman. One summer evening in 1978, Bob was driving outside of Bozeman, Montana, when he saw a brilliant illumination alongside the highway. Wondering if there was a fire, he stopped to check it out. To his amazement, he saw a landed metallic craft and 3 little humanoids with bald heads and large dark eyes. He hid in fear behind a boulder and watched until the little humanoids entered the craft, which rose up into the air and darted off into the sky. A sunny day with aliens. One sunny day in May 1979, a family of 4, a mother, her daughter, and twin sons, exited their apartment complex in Toronto, Canada. Looking up, they observed a giant oval-shaped craft hovering just a few feet above their building. To their complete surprise, about 30 humanoid figures were visible through the portholes, walking back and forth inside the strange craft. They watched for 10 minutes until the craft suddenly accelerated off into the distance and was gone. The little boy in the UFO. At 6 p.m. on September 1, 1984, 6-year-old Nao Nishimoto was riding her bike when a flying saucer dropped down from the sky and began to hover over the field in front of her home in Takamatsu, Japan. Suddenly a face appeared in one of the portholes. It was a little boy, smiling and looking down at her. As the craft moved away, she chased it on her bike. The craft remained a few moments longer. The little boy in the window waved goodbye to Nao, and the craft darted away. The smiling aliens. One evening in July 1992, Reuben Taylor and his mother drove along the 101 Hollywood freeway in a densely populated area of Echo Park, near Los Angeles, California. Without warning, a huge circular craft studded with colored lights appeared overhead. The craft moved closer, and they were both amazed to see several human-looking ETs looking down through the portholes and grinning at them. These 6 amazing cases are just a tiny sample of the massive number of documented accounts of humanoids coming from all over the planet. These cases make it obvious that we live in a universe populated by many different types of humanoids who are not that different from us. We are not alone. What I saw was 4 feet tall. It was around 2:30 a.m. on March 20, 1997, as a man was in his home in Port Perry, Ontario, Canada. Suddenly, movement caught his eye, and looking in that direction, he was shocked to see gray aliens standing in his home. He said they were short and skinny with large bald heads and were moving their arms in slow motion. They quickly disappeared. He watched them for only a few seconds but realized that more time had passed than he thought. He believes he may have experienced a lapse in time. Several encounters with demons in the past. I am concerned they might return, which could be due to my actions. My name is Daniel, 22 years old, and when I was around 19, I started toying with the Ouija board a lot. It took a long time before bad things happened. One time one just paralyzed me and spoke tongues in my ear in a feminine voice. Once it released me, eventually I turned and saw the demon run into my kitchen, a gray running figure. Another time I saw that same figure run into my restroom. One time a demon dragged me from my bed to the floor. However, the scariest experience I have is one that's mostly been blacked out, suppressed by my subconscious, I theorize. I was standing in between my living room and dining room and kitchen area. The dining room is in front of me, the kitchen to the right of it, and the living room behind me. There was a girl sitting at the dining table. I'd wipe my eyes, and she'd still be there. Then a man appears standing in my kitchen, however, he's fading in and out as an apparition, but the girl is fully there. What happened next? I don't know, I just know how it ended. Me in my bedroom crying with a Bible on my chest. For all the other experiences I mentioned, I wasn't afraid. I know I am more powerful than the demons, so I never was really afraid, more so just waited for the encounters to end. I don't know what happened for me to be so scared. When I awoke, I believed it to be a nightmare, but after returning from my shower to make my bed, I found the Bible in the process and then knew it was real. Eventually I went to jail and rehab for about a year and stayed away from such things upon my return, except for a pendulum I bought, which my mother threw away months ago. The Halloween before this one, I talked to Zozo a good amount of times, which I knew of from YouTube, and nothing even happened that time. That's the last time I remember playing. 2 weeks ago, though, I played again. At some point, the oracle got away from my hand, my friend's hand stayed on it, and I put my hands back on it and proceeded to say goodbye. I held the oracle lightly, the demon was attempting to do an omen, figure 8, so we were going to say goodbye as it jolted away from me. We felt a presence and then burned sage. This was at my friend's house. We played one more time while the sage burned. For the first time ever, after we ended the second session. I said I don't think we should play anymore. I slept over at her house fine. Ever since then, in my room at night, I feel the presence of evil. I had awoken from a nightmare at my house a day or two after the last Ouija from a horrific demonic nightmare. In my dreams I'm much more vulnerable and full of so much fear that I cry in them. I wanted to go urinate but heard footsteps in the hallway and figured one of my brothers was using the restroom in the middle of the night, as we tend to do. After waiting a few minutes, I went to see if the restroom was available. That's when I realized both my brothers were in deep sleep. I could hear them snoring loudly in their room. Since then I just hear little sounds, which may be nothing, but on nights I feel the presence of evil in my room as I'm about to sleep, and then in my dreams I'm being attacked by demons 9 times out of 10 when I dream. In my dreams when I'm being attacked, I'm usually trying to get away from them, begging my mother for help with her Bibles and prayers. Every time I wake up, I feel this light headache on the front center of my forehead. The first nightmare I had since the incident, I woke up a few times, and every time I went back to sleep, I'd go right back into my nightmare, so now when it happens, I avoid sleeping for a little. If I was able to turn my life away from this before, I'm sure I can do it again. Will someone please give me some advice on how to end this? Dream catchers and sage? Any advice is greatly appreciated. Even if no one responds, I kind of just felt like journaling this. Thanks. The Gray in the Bedroom. On April 11, 2013, a woman awoke from a deep sleep to find herself standing at the bedroom door of her parents' home in Catania, Italy. Compelled to open the door, she was shocked to see a short gray alien, and floating in the air next to it, in a vertical position, was her mother, clearly entranced and unconscious. When the gray turned and looked at the witness, she panicked, slammed the door, fled to the bathroom, locked the door, and hid in the bathtub. This moment was the first of a series of strange events. I was a sophomore in college. I walked into my math class like any other day and sat in my usual spot, about 4 seats in on the 3rd row. Even though we didn't have assigned seats, there was always a girl sitting 2 seats to the left of me, an empty seat between us, and her male friend to her left. They seemed to just be good friends, always laughing, never any reason to give me concern. This day in particular, I sat down, got my spiral and pencil out, and just quietly sat there looking forward and thinking about what I was going to do after class. Suddenly, I got this eerie feeling. I looked up to my left, and my heart practically stopped. The girl was staring straight at me, blank-faced, and her eyes were shining like a bright, piercing electric blue. Shining like lasers. Nothing at all natural. I can't explain accurately. I was basically paralyzed and couldn't move or say anything. Eventually, I blinked, looked forward, then looked back, and saw the girl's head turn back to her friend as he resumed his conversation. About 2 years later, I was with friends, and we were driving to a restaurant. Traffic was building up since it was rush hour, and we were stopped in the right lane. I'm in the back seat, and I happen to look up, diagonally to the left, and through the windshield. I look into the car sitting in the lane next to us. Its back bumper is parallel to our front bumper, so I can see the driver easily. He's turned almost completely around and is looking back at me, staring intensely. Even from that distance, I could see his eyes were that piercing, bright, laser-like blue, and I froze again. Just like the last incident, I was eventually able to blink, look away, and then immediately look back. The man was turned forward, the light turned green, and we all started moving forward. It's been about 15 years, and I haven't experienced anything like that again, but it ducked with my mind for a while. Tall apparition in my house. I'm not going to say this apparition is demonic, because, many people in this community don't believe demons exist, and I don't have enough proof that this was actually a demon. If they exist, just my belief they do, but whatever this was not a kind spirit. This experience took place around 12:30 a.m., December 27, 2014, which is today, and I was just sitting on the couch while using my computer and listening to music. I looked to my left, into the kitchen of my dad's house, and I swear on my life, I saw something. It was tall and a grayish transparent. It didn't fit in with the surrounding area of the kitchen, so it kind of stood out. I could clearly make out the outline. It seemed like a male and he was about 7 feet tall. The main reason I believe it is a demon is that it emitted a strong negative vibe. Have you ever entered a room where 2 people are clearly angry with each other? It was like that. You could sense some anger coming off of it, but I didn't know what it was angry at. Was it angry at me? I'm not sure. I've been researching the paranormal and, at the same time, doing investigations for about 4 years now. I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I am kind of experienced, and in all the years of my investigating, I've never seen or experienced such a thing. I've seen apparitions, that's what made me believe in spirits and the paranormal. Well, the shadow was standing in the corner of the kitchen, and I didn't have enough time to grab my camera or get up and confront it. It moved to the right. It didn't walk, it glided and stayed the same height. I don't really have any explanation for what I saw. Did anybody else have something similar? I and my sister saw a potential demon, like a man with its face melting off. So, when I was 16 and my sister was 14, we used to go to our grandma's house every day after school to take care of her barn cats. And before we went, we always stopped at the only tiny little grocery store in our town, and we would get soda and Little Debbie cakes and dispose of the evidence in the barn burn barrels so our parents wouldn't get mad. So one day we were in the store, and my sister and I were at opposite ends of an aisle. I went to walk around to the next, and I was looking down at the floor like I always do. I have social anxiety, and I avoid eye contact at all costs. So I saw a pair of worn brown boots first. Work boots like all the men in town wore. Nothing crazy. Then I saw jeans, worn too. It felt like slow motion. Then I saw the hands. The hands appeared swollen, bulbous, and wet. Pale white. Like a dead body. I immediately felt chills run down my spine, and I continued looking up. It felt like slow motion. I saw his button-down red flannel shirt. And then I saw his face. It was like it was melting. His mouth was just a black hole, and I believe his eyes were too. I didn't look for more than half a second before my flight instinct forced me to turn around and walk back down the aisle. I wanted to run, but I was so scared that he would chase me if I ran, so I very purposely kept my regular pace and walked to my sister before I turned around to make sure he wasn't following me. He was not. I told my sister, "You need to go down the aisle and look to your left. Right now." And she's laughing, thinking it's a cute boy or something, and I'm like, "Dude, no, I am being serious, you need to look." So she walked down, and I stayed a few paces behind. When she reached the end of the aisle, she froze, staring in front of her like she was seeing a ghost. I believe she was. Her fear response was to freeze. I said her name, and she didn't react. She was completely frozen in fear. I tried again, and she didn't answer, so I grabbed her arm and yanked her, and we both ran as fast as we could back down the aisle and to the other side of the store. We were both shaking. I asked her what she saw, and she described exactly what I had seen. It was not human. There is no way that anybody could ever convince me it was. And the energy around it was so foul and rotten. We had both had experiences with the paranormal before, but nothing like this. We looked around to see if anyone else was scared, but everyone was just being normal, like they hadn't seen it. I told her we should ask them to check the cameras, but she said no way they'd let us and they'd probably just call us crazy. I knew she was right, so we left. Then that night she woke up and saw it standing in her doorway, so she squeezed her eyes shut and didn't open them until morning. I never saw it again, and I'm honestly convinced that the second time she saw it, it was sleep paralysis / a nightmare / hallucination from the fear she'd felt earlier. We went to a Catholic school, and so my sister was so affected by this that she went to speak to the parish priest. He was no help at all. He said people in our state, we went to school in the next state over, are crazy, and it was probably just a guy in a mask. If I have ever been sure about anything in my life, I know it was not a mask. I know. I don't know what it was, but it was not human. To this day my sister can't speak of it. It affected her a lot. She's scared to talk about it because she's worried that she might draw it back toward her. I am uncertain as to why I am writing this. Perhaps it is because I feel the need to discuss it with someone, and the only individual who would believe me, as she witnessed it as well, is unable to speak about it. Please just let me know your thoughts on this. For context, that was about 6 years ago now. I know what I saw. My husband finally saw it too. The newborn phase is hard. Most parents will tell you hard is an understatement. In reality, you spend most of your time dirty and delirious, desperately trying to avoid nodding off into your third or fourth morning cup of coffee. You're already dealing with constant worry, inconsolable screaming, endless poopy diapers, and wondering what each stain on your shirt is. You have no hope of getting a full night's sleep. You hardly have time to eat, let alone cook. A shower suddenly becomes the height of luxury. What I'm trying to get at is, it's easy to believe your mind may be playing tricks on you when you see something in the shadows in the dead of night while you have a newborn, but this isn't my imagination, and I need to know if any other new parents have seen this too. Well before my due date, we set up the baby monitor. We left the monitor on at night in order to get used to the screen's persistent glow cutting through the darkness of our room. I'm a night owl, frequently staying up until 2 or 3 in the morning, so I spent many nights glancing at the screen and never noticed anything unusual. The same was true for the first few months of my daughter's life while she slept in the bassinet beside our bed. But on her first night alone in her room, I noticed a particularly dark spot in the corner that seemed to pulse, as if it were alive. As if it were breathing. I squinted. I zoomed the camera in. I even went into the room and peeked at the corner myself. Upon glancing back at the screen, I noticed that the spot had shifted from the corner to the middle of the room, transforming into a distinct, humanoid silhouette. and it was looking in my direction. Fear engulfed me immediately. I stared at the figure on the screen as it stared at me. I had trouble tearing my eyes away, frozen in terror, but knew I had to look up. I had to see it for myself. But when I looked up, nothing was there. I rushed over and scooped up my daughter, bringing her back to her bassinet in our room, and when I looked back at the monitor as I plugged it in, I noticed the figure was gone. What was lingering was the chill that had been sent up my spine and an unshakable feeling that I was being watched. I spent the rest of the night staring at the door, as if I was waiting for someone to come barging through it. It was a week before my husband could convince me to let our daughter sleep in her room again. "You're tired, you're stressed. You probably just saw a shadow," he kept repeating. I finally gave in just to make him drop it. I spent the entire night sitting up in bed, eyes glued to the monitor, scanning constantly for pulsating shadows, but none showed up. After a few nights with no overnight visitors, I began to relax. After a few weeks I started to believe that my husband must have been right. It must have been a figment of my imagination. But last night I rolled over to take one last peek before going to sleep for the night, expecting to see my daughter sleeping in her crib, but she wasn't in her crib at all. She wasn't even in the room. The shadow was standing right over her empty cot. Its head snapped up in the direction of the camera, as if this thing was trying to look into it. To look at me. I immediately smacked my husband awake and shoved the monitor in front of his face. "Where's the baby?" I yelled as he rubbed his eyes, trying to quickly come back to consciousness. "What are you talking about?" He yawned, finally focusing on the monitor, eyes suddenly going wide and moving to scan my undoubtedly unhinged expression. "What's that thing?" he asked me, not waiting for the answer as he sprung out of bed, running into her room as I scanned every corner of ours, as if she could have magically teleported in here on her own. I didn't see her anywhere, so I followed my husband, hesitantly for some reason, and made my way to the nursery doorway, monitor in hand. On the monitor, I could see my husband frantically searching high and low in the room, but more importantly, I could also see a figure looming over him, reaching out and trying to touch him. Suddenly, my husband whipped around, panting as if he expected someone to be there but saw nothing. But I could see it. From the doorway I glanced up at them, but instead of seeing my husband, I was met with the face of the thing, inches from my own, with deep, black eyes staring into my soul itself. The skin was covered in boils so full they could burst at any moment. Giant, jagged, yellow teeth leaked drool overstretched, cracked lips. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. It opened its mouth, and I expected my ears to be met with a disgusting gurgling, but instead a sweeping crescendo of infant cries engulfed me. Not just one infant, but many, all screeching in perfect harmony, transfixing me with their heart-shattering sounds. The screams became an all-encompassing roar, growing louder and louder, before suddenly stopping altogether, the beast vanishing right before my eyes. I then heard a quieter, familiar cry from my daughter's crib. She lay there, squirming a bit, beginning to fuss, and my husband and I exchanged confused looks before he picked her up and brought her back to our room. I don't think I'll ever be letting her sleep in that room again. The thing that's really bothering me, though, is that something feels just the slightest bit off about my daughter. Has she undergone any changes? I lived in a very old house in the hills of western Maryland that had windows only in the front and back. I was told the design was to keep slaves from looking in. We rented from a family friend who owned the house, and before we moved in, we were told it was special, but no one explained what that meant. I came to find out that the house was, I won't say haunted, more like enchanted. Weird things happen there a lot. The strangest occurrence by far took place a couple of months before I moved away. Across the street was an open field that quickly turned into foothills, and maybe 300 yards further on, it became a tall ridge of a mountain. There was some kind of antenna on top of the ridge, and it had a light that was always on at night. There was no blinking, just a constant, steady white light. One evening I went out to use the bathroom, yeah, it had an outhouse, and happened to notice that the light on the ridge was off. I walked down the driveway a bit because I thought maybe there was a tree blocking it from this angle or something, but I was stopped dead in my tracks. Suddenly the entire sky behind the ridge lit up. It was like someone had turned on extremely bright floodlights, but there was no snow on the ground, and it was not even slightly overcast. The silence was eerily pronounced, even more so than usual. Well, now I was really damned curious, so I continued walking down the driveway to see if I could get a better angle on it, only to see somebody come around the curve of the street from the left and approach me in a quick walk. This is a fairly remote neighborhood. There are 2 other inhabited houses on the street. We hardly ever see traffic, much less foot traffic, so the encounter was unexpected. As he got close enough, he said, "You don't want to go over there," in a cautioning tone. It is not as though I intended to ascend the mountain in the dark, however. Why, what's going on? I asked, trying to keep it conversational. I can't say for sure, he replied, but you definitely wouldn't want to be involved. Well, if you don't know what's going on, how can you be sure that I don't want to be part of it? I asked. That's pretty weird. I gestured in the direction of the ridge and noticed the light was fluctuating a bit, like a slow pulsing. No, that's weird as hell, and I'm a curious person. The person then shifted to a darker, more ominous tone and said, your eyes are not meant to see. His tone made me think you meant human, and in retrospect, it definitely felt like a warning, maybe even a threat, almost sounding like a kind of ritual pronouncement. However, I was unaware at the time. I glanced back at the light and remarked, I can see it clearly, please clarify the issue. However, when I turned my gaze back, the individual had vanished from view. In the space of the maybe 5 seconds I was looking away, he had disappeared. There is no direction he could have taken that would allow him to disappear from my line of sight in such a short amount of time, regardless of how fast he was running. The strange lights had already begun to frighten me, but this incident significantly escalated my level of fear. I went back inside and explained to my roommate what had just happened and encouraged him to come out and see for himself, but by the time we got back outside, whatever was going on behind that ridge was over. I reasoned that the man might have been delusional and that there must have been a common occurrence nearby, so I accessed Google Maps for the region. There was nothing on the other side of that ridge, no roads, no buildings, no signs of civilization whatsoever, just a blank spot on the map. I switched to satellite view and saw nothing but more wooded ridgelines behind it. To this day I have no idea what the hell was going on or why I was warned away from it, but it feels like I had been sent some kind of messenger to keep me from blundering into something terrible. Meeting the aliens, 5 on-board UFO encounters. What is it like to go on board a UFO and meet ETs face to face? It is perhaps the ultimate UFO encounter. This compilation presents 5 incredible accounts of people taken on board an extraterrestrial craft. While many people experience missing time and recalling what happened under hypnosis, all 5 of these cases involve fully conscious recall without the use of hypnotic regression. Also, all 5 cases contain strong evidence pointing to the reality of the encounter. They come from across the planet and provide a close-up look at what it's like to meet humanoids face to face. They also provide answers to the many questions surrounding extraterrestrial contact and the ET agenda on our planet. The case of War-Abe Amanaka. One summer evening in 1926, 2-year-old War-Abe Amanaka heard a telepathic voice mentally calling out to him. Venturing outside his home in Matsuyama, Japan, he met a tall, blonde-haired, human-looking figure who said they would meet again. Over the next 3 years, the man, who War-Abe nicknamed Uncle, appeared each summer. Then on August 2, 1930, War-Abe, age 5, heard the familiar telepathic voice and, going outside, met Uncle again. This time, War-Abe was taken into a craft and given a ride around to various locations on Earth, viewing whales in the sea, elephants on the plains of Africa, and the Great Pyramids of Egypt. Once they returned home, the ETs promised to pay him another visit. On one occasion, the ETs gave War-Abe a strange metal box. The case remains one of the strangest contact accounts in Japan's history of UFO encounters. The case of Nicholas Henry Edwards. In July 1952, at age 9, Nicholas Edwards was near his residence in Point Defiance Park in Washington state when he saw a strange craft in the sky and then suddenly found himself in a strange room surrounded by short humanoids. Not long after this experience, he and his entire family had a close-up sighting of an unidentified craft. But it wasn't until November 15, 1959, that Nick, now 16, experienced a long and complex on-board encounter. While driving with 2 friends in California, a UFO levitated their car on board. Nick's 2 friends fell unconscious, but Nick remained fully awake and aware as short, human-like ETs with big, dark eyes and pale skin pulled him from his vehicle and led him to another room. The ETs were kind and gentle as they placed him on a table and examined him with strange instruments. The strange onboard encounter changed his life forever. The case of Klaus-Dieter Kaufmann. At 8:30 p.m. one evening in the spring of 1960, 14-year-old Klaus-Dieter Kaufmann was returning to his home in Frankfurt, Germany, after attending the movies when suddenly a Saturn-shaped craft appeared above him. A beam of light came down, hit him, and rendered him unconscious. He awakened a few hours later. Frightened, he fled to his home and discovered a strange mark on his back. Many years later, as an adult, he went to have surgery, and his physician said that it looked like Klaus-Dieter had already had surgery on his back. This caused Klaus-Dieter to remember his encounter with the UFO and what happened during the missing time. He remembered being pulled on board the craft, where he was confronted by different kinds of humanoids, who gave him a strange exam. Despite his fear, one of the humanoids comforted him, promising to return him to his home. The case of Gilberto Gregorio Coccioli. At 3 a.m. on October 4, 1972, Gilberto Coccioli, age 50, went outside his home in Bursaco, Argentina to check on his dog. Suddenly, a beam of light came down from the sky and levitated him on board a craft hovering above him. 7-foot-tall humanoids greeted him inside, sat him down on a circular bench, and examined him. Gilberto saw many things beyond his ability to understand. 2 other human-looking women were on board and had intimate relations with him. He saw a small pile of stones and convinced the ETs to give him one. The ETs then placed him back on the ground, handing him the stone. The experience severely traumatized his dog. The stone turned out to be earthly iron pyrite. Gilberto remained in contact with the ETs, who began to teach him science, philosophy, and spirituality. The case of Istvan Balog. On the night of December 26, 1991, Istvan Balog, a 21-year-old border guard, returned home to find a flying saucer hovering over his backyard in Békés, Hungary. A week prior to this, he had heard a strange telepathic message, repeating, "You will meet us." He was unable to resist as he was pulled on board the craft, where he was greeted by short humanoids, 4 feet tall with greenish skin, large eyes, and 3 fingers on each hand. They said that they had watched him for 3 years and would take him on a long voyage. He remembered seeing the moon and other strange sights before being returned to the front of his home. He told his superiors what happened to him and was immediately relieved of his position. A psychiatric exam showed him to be of sound mind, but a physical exam showed that a platinum rod, which had been placed after breaking his arm, was now mysteriously missing. Really scared, but also curious. After visiting a friend's house in a small town in rural Utah one summer night in 1981, a woman was driving the short distance to her home when her car broke down. It was only 2 miles back to her house, so she decided to walk and return for her car in the morning. But moments later, a glowing white craft the size of a trailer whooshed silently overhead and then landed in the middle of the road in front of her. The witness's curiosity overcame her fear, and she approached the craft. A hatch opened, and a little human-looking man stepped out. She smiled and waved at him. The man seemed shocked and shouted something through the open door of the UFO. Instantly there was a flash of light, and the witness fainted. As she regained consciousness on the ground, she realized that the small man and his craft had vanished. Demon Dog Encounter. My name is Charles. And I have a story that I've been nervous to tell anyone until now because I was always afraid people would call me a liar and a fake. I'm 33 years old now, and I still live in the house where this took place to this day. It was the early 2000s, and I moved into this house when I was 18 years old. I live in North Carolina, and I've lived here pretty much all my life, and I haven't seen many weird things, but those are stories for another day. Right now, I want to tell you about the most terrifying thing I have ever witnessed in my life. As I said, I was 18 years old in the mid-2000s, and right around that time I was going to house with my mother at the time to rent until we finally saved up enough money to buy our own house, and we bought it in the wooded community in the mountains. And it's a 2-level house, fully furnished downstairs and upstairs. And we moved here right after 2 elderly couples moved out of here, going towards Tennessee to live there. So we moved in, we got comfortable, and everything was going fine for a while. That is until one night my mother had to work, and I was home by myself. I was watching television, eating dinner, minding my own business, and at this time I also had a very friendly cat. And he was also very loving, so I was sitting there watching TV, eating dinner, enjoying myself. And that's when my cat started to rise and started to hiss, and the fur on his back was standing up profusely. As he was riled up like that, it was followed by nothing on my side door. Now I live downstairs, and I have a sliding glass door. And it leads to the backyard, so I had blackout curtains drawn. Because we live close to the neighbors, and I don't want anyone nosing in my business, after my cat was riled up heard knocking coming from my glass sliding door. At first, I thought maybe it was the neighbors coming over, but then I realized, how could that be? It's late at night, and nobody should be introducing themselves at this time. So consciously I approached the sliding door, and I had a bat in my hand that I grabbed out of one of the boxes that I was unpacking. As I approached the door, I still heard that knocking, and it started to turn into scratching at the glass. Something wanted in. So without any hesitation, I pulled back the curtain, and right there in front of me was something I was not expecting at all. It was a dark figure on all fours. It looks too big to be a cat and too big to be a dog, but way too small to be a bear or any other large animal. The one or two things that I noticed were its eyes glaring right back at me, and the only thing that was separating us was thin sheets of glass. At this point I was unable to move but still keeping my eyes on this thing as it was keeping its eyes on me as well. It was intensely frightening. I was terrified this thing, this whatever this was looking at me as if I were a meal to it. We'd kept on staring at each other intently for about a few minutes, but those few minutes felt like hours to me. Very intense hours as I looked deep into its red eyes. I also noticed that it was licking its jaws, knowing that it knew the only thing that was separating us was the glass and it could easily bust through to get to me. It got into a crouching stance, about to make its move. Until my mother pulled up, and she honked her horn to let me know that she was home, and the creature heard this as well. And that's when it took off and went into the woods. When my mother got into the house, I ran upstairs to tell her what happened, but she shrugged it off and told me it was probably just the starving stray dog. But I tried to tell her that a stray dog does not have glowing blood red eyes, even if the light hits them just right. A dog does not have those types of eyes, I tried to tell her. But she kept on insisting that it was just my imagination and I was being paranoid because we were in a new place. So a few days after that, I haven't seen it since. But I know it's still out there watching me. I don't know how, I don't know why, I just have this feeling that it's still there somewhere. Waiting to make its move one day. So that's why I nowadays do not go outside walking without a knife or some type of weapon in my pocket. And a cell phone because I never know when I might see it again or hear that scratching at my door. Only time can tell when I will see that thing face to face once more. So take that as a warning, those who live in the woods, make sure you have a weapon and make sure there's somebody there with you. Because I don't want someone to go through the same experience I did, and in some way I still am. Stay safe and stay protected. A little over 20 years ago, my friends and I went to a 4th of July party at the house of a guy they went to high school with. It started out pretty chill, but as the night went on, it ended up being the kind of party I didn't think actually existed outside of an 80s teen movie. Huge house in a rich neighborhood. No regard for property damage. Picture the party at the end of Weird Science, but subtract the mutant bikers and add a couple hundred kids in their teens and early 20s, half of whom were on LSD, and many of whom showed up with literal carloads of fireworks. At some point these two guys showed up. Nobody knew who they were. They spoke to no one, not even each other. They didn't eat anything. They didn't drink anything. They didn't try to interact with anyone at all that I saw. What they did do was freak everyone straight the duck out. Visually they were exactly average. They were average in height, appearance, build, age, and ethnicity. 100% forgettable. Except, they absolutely radiated darkness and hostility. They would just stand on opposite sides of a room and glare angrily at each other for a while, then walk into a different room to glare angrily at each other again. They seemed to communicate with each other like that. Creepy as hell. It was like there was some kind of evil force inside of them that was barely contained by their skin. If they walked into a room where you were, it felt like the air itself suddenly became oppressive. At some point my friends and I dipped out to go check out another party up in the mountains, and a couple of people we knew took off to a different party in a town in the opposite direction of where we were going and about 30 miles away from the original party. About halfway to our destination, we stopped at a gas station to get smokes and drinks. When we walked out, those guys were there. They were standing outside of their car, perfectly still, just staring holes through us. I don't know if I've ever felt that creeped out. We all piled into our car in record time and peeled out of the parking lot. Thankfully it didn't look like they tried to follow us, and we never saw them again. A few hours later we went back to the first party to find a girl we knew sitting on the floor holding a baseball bat, jumpy as hell, ready to swing at anything that looked threatening. Apparently those guys got way creepier after we left. Nobody provided any details about the incident, so I never found out exactly what happened. However, everyone who had stayed at the first party appeared thoroughly shaken. The next day I ran into one of the people that took off to the other party, and right about the same time we had our gas station encounter with the spooky twins. They had the exact same encounter with the same guys at a gas station probably 50 miles away from where we were. Meanwhile, the people who stayed at the first party swear those guys didn't leave the party until hours after we saw them at the gas station. It was all intensely freaky. I don't know who they were or what they wanted, but I doubt they were human. Years ago, I worked at a nature facility that covered approximately 500 acres and included several miles of walking trails. One day, I had a lady come into the office and tell me there was a dead armadillo in the middle of one of the trails. I went to clean it up. It had a single bite on its underbelly. The next day I was walking the trails, and I came across another armadillo. Same thing, a single bite to the underbelly. The process went on for 14 days. Every day I had to remove an armadillo. Number 13 was on a trail on the back side of the park. While I was cleaning up the armadillo, an old man looking to be in his late 70s with sun-weathered skin walked up to me. He was wearing a Western-style shirt. He said he's just messing with you. I said, "Hey, bud, what are you talking about?" He referred to himself as the trickster. I said, "Do what now?" He said the coyote is just messing with you. He thinks it's funny how mad you get. I said, "Well, I wish he'd stop." The old man just chuckled and started walking off. I told him, "Have a good day, bud." As he walked away and turned the bend in the trail, he waved and said, "You too." I tossed the armadillo into the brush. I was less than 10 seconds behind the old man. I turned the bend. He had vanished. I looked all over for him. I walked the trails for hours, asking everyone I saw if they had seen him. No one had. The next day when I got to work, I went in the office to check my emails. I opened the window blinds, and there was an armadillo with one bite in its underbelly lying under my window. That was the last one, number 14. I sat there thinking about the old man's shirt, which had geometric coyotes printed on it against a desert background. I'm pretty sure that old man was the trickster. It was on a warm summer day in 2005 when a man named JF was sitting on a porch in the town of Chicora. It was a warm day, and he and several of his friends had decided to enjoy the day hanging out at one of his friends' parents' house. The house was in the thicker end of the woods, almost on the outskirts of Chicora. Anyone from Pennsylvania knows that our towns are often enveloped by thick woodlands, and even some of our smaller cities are a stone's throw away from deep forests. This area is prone to unpredictable events. The group convened on the back porch as he and 7 or 8 of his closest compatriots sat and watched as the sun began to dip lower in the sky. As the sun set, the group continued their conversations while sitting at a table. The group was the spirit of sobriety, simply enjoying each other and the world around them, never expecting anything more bizarre than a potential encounter with a deer or raccoon. It was around 10 o'clock when darkness enveloped the group. The deck was nearly unobstructed, except for a few plants that his friend's mother had placed on the porch to add some greenery to the otherwise brown space. These plants were located towards the opposite side of where the group was sitting, and as a way to water the plants at night and give those coming in some light, a motion sensor light was connected to the side of the house just above that area. As the night waned, so too did the conversation, and as anyone who has sat late with a friend knows, sometimes there's a moment where no one talks. In one of these awkward yet peaceful silences, a strange sound was heard. The sound was hard and hollow at the same time. All the heads turned to where the group believed the origin of the sound came from. The hollow yet hard sound seemed to have emanated from the plant pots as though something had moved or bumped into them. The groups looked, and there, flittering and fluttering, seemed to be a large moth. Yet the group's attention was still captivated as well. First, this seemed to simply be a normal entomological entity. They were taken aback by the size, which was much larger than any mundane moth. The size of this creature was about a foot, and that was enough to perplex the group of teens. The creature shot straight up from the pot, but the more the group stared at the strange creature, the more it seemed unnatural. The group could tell automatically that this creature had wings, yet the wings were folded around the body, cocooning the strange beast. JF stared intently at this strange figure just as the others had begun to lose interest when he realized that whatever this creature was, it was not an insect like butterfly or moth or even a bat, but instead something more esoteric. He realized, the more he stared at it, that instead of a triangular, insect-like head, the creature had a large head resembling a human's. However, this was bizarre because its large ears appeared to be camouflaged to resemble antennae. Yet the head, even though it was similar to a person's, had not a strand of long flowing hair or thick hair, as one would expect from something described as human-like. As JF attempted to accept the humanoid nature of this creature, it began to float higher into the air. The creature floated for a brief second in the air before its enclosed wings sprung open. The scene was like something from Jeepers Creepers as the creature's membranous flight aids uncurled, revealing a membranous gliding type wing that connected from the arms along the body to the feet. As the creature did this, JF and his friends could see that their uninvited guest was surprisingly even more human. JF would describe and later sketch the creature, indicating that it had a perfectly female form with breasts, delicate fingers at the end of slender arms, long legs with intricate toes, and other features that would indicate the fairer sex. Yet all this was incomparable to the wings, which he and his friends would describe as being similar to the skin of an earlobe, thick, coarse, and semi-transparent. He could see veins as the creature was illuminated in the light of the motion sensor. The creature they could see was a pale green that seemed to glow in the light, yet it was covered in short white hairs, giving it a magical quality. This human/bat/butterfly was about the size, weight, and shape of a squirrel, yet this density seemed opposed to gravity, for as the strange creature unveiled itself, it seemed to float in the air. However, this moment passed quickly, and the creature began to fly about 4 feet above the group and the table before making its way toward the potential safety and solace of the woods. The entire length of time it took for the flying human was a mere 7 to 10 seconds, but it felt like a lifetime. It was escaping the gaze of the group and leaving them mystified about the occurrences that just happened. The group stared in astonishment and silence, mouths agape, for what they had seen could not have existed in the real world but certainly in the worlds of Labyrinth or the Dark Crystal. The group turned and stared at each other wide-eyed, and in a cacophony of voices began a process of profanity that would make a sailor blush. The group, in between excited profanity and unbelief, began to frantically try to rationalize what they had seen, going through the obvious suspects: moth, bat, mutated bird, swamp gas, and sandhill crane. Until the group, running out of potential theories, finally went quiet and realized that what they had encountered was, in fact, a fairy. About an hour later, JF and his girlfriend had left and continued to continuously discuss the strange figure that they encountered and how, in that brief moment, it changed their entire perceptions of everything around them and that the world was, in fact, more magical than they had ever thought. It is important to note that JF, unlike most cryptid witnesses, was not terrified by his encounter but viewed it as a beautiful and enchanting experience, as though walking into a dream. I find this extremely interesting, for, in many accounts of those who encounter the unknown, especially those who have encountered Mothman or the Jersey Devil or even Bigfoot, there are years of terror that their encounters claimed. Could it be the size or pre-knowledge of fairies that caused this, since most of the traumatic cryptid encounters are of creatures larger than us? Who's to say? I am glad, though, that he can find comfort in his encounter, for that is the best we can hope for anyone who encounters an as of yet undiscovered species. It was gone within seconds. In early August 1983, numerous residents over a wide area in central Puerto Rico reported seeing strange craft of various types, cylindrical and saucer-shaped, hovering and zooming around in the night sky. On the night of August 13, a man in the Algarrobo area was hunting for archaeological relics when he heard the sound of swarming bees. Looking up, he saw a large, pyramidal-shaped craft hovering only a few hundred feet overhead. And looking down at him through a large rectangular porthole were 3 humanoids wearing silver jumpsuits. After a few minutes, the object darted away at fantastic speed. 10 startling cases of humanoids and aliens. Humanoid and alien encounters. They are perhaps the most fascinating aspect of ufology and have so much to teach us about the ET agenda. This compilation presents 10 cases from all over the world involving a wide variety of extraterrestrials. There are human-looking ETs, little dwarfs, frog-like beings, flying humanoids, and more. Many involve multiple witnesses and startling physical evidence such as landing traces, medical effects, animal reactions, and electromagnetic disturbances. There are too many cases to ignore, deny, or explain away. Something very profound is happening here. 1. 10 little aliens. One evening in January 1931, cattle herder Helge Eriksson was walking to his home in Eslöv, Sweden, when he saw a crowd of 10 little men coming towards him. They were only about 4 feet tall, with oversized heads and long beards. They wore one-piece robes with hoods and seemed to float across the ground. They ignored Helga and approached a brilliant light source, after which they disappeared. 2. The ET in the Purple Cape. It was a sunny afternoon on February 29, 1964, as David and Ken, ages 10 and 9, saw a saucer land near their homes in Plympton, South Australia. To their shock, a door opened, and out stepped a human-looking ET with copper-red skin and a big nose. It wore a strange suit with a purple cape. As soon as it saw the boys, it fled back into its craft, which promptly took off. Interestingly, not far away, another lady in Gumtree, South Australia, saw a very similar-looking ET. 3. The aliens on the highway. Around 4 a.m. on August 23, 1967, Stanley Moxon was driving near Joyceville, Ontario, Canada, when he saw a glowing green craft descending alongside the road. He turned off his headlights, drove up to them, and flicked on his lights. To his shock, it had landed, and 2 short ETs were outside picking plants. Surprised, they flew back into the craft, which took off straight up. 4. The flying humanoid. One night in 1967, Patricia Kay and her fiancé were driving near Woolstanton, England, when she saw a classic flying saucer. It flew away before her fiancé could see it. But 8 years later, their 8-year-old son was drawn to look outside by a loud buzzing noise. To his amazement, he saw 2 3-foot-tall humanoids flying past his window mere feet away. 5. I would not harm a hair on your head. Around 3:15 a.m. on January 8, 1974, John E. Justice was driving to his home in Springfield, Ohio, when his car stalled and his lights went out. Instantly, a brilliant rainbow-colored light appeared, transforming into a small craft. Inside, he was shocked to see 5 female humanoids, each about 4 feet tall, with super long hair. The craft darted away after a few moments, but 1 year later, he had an even more startling encounter with a humanoid. 6. I was really afraid. On the night of November 17, 1975, 2 college students, Dave Vardman and Suzanne Ehrenberger, watched a brilliant light descend to the ground near Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Suzanne was amazed to see a metallic craft with 2 humanoids inside. But strangely, Dave didn't remember seeing any craft or humanoids. All he recalls is that they were both frightened enough to flee the area and call the police. 7. 50 frog-like ETS. At 9 p.m. on May 2, 1976, Dominique Menuge was driving near Madden, France, when reflections off the side of the road caught his eye. To his shock, he saw about 54-foot-tall frog-like humanoids standing motionless in the field. Terrified, he pulled a U-turn and fled the area, but not before he saw one of the humanoids standing only a few feet away from his car. 8. Almost abducted by aliens. On September 9, 1976, Hermelindo Silva was walking home with his dog when a UFO appeared overhead. Suddenly, it sent down 4 cables with hooks. Short little humanoids came out of the craft and managed to grab him, hook his ankle, and pull him up towards the craft. Hermelindo fought with them and freed himself, but not without sustaining some serious injuries. 9. Unnatural eyes. On the night of March 13, 1977, 17-year-old Stephen Taylor was walking to his home in Pembroke, Wales, when he saw a brilliant orange craft. He ran away, but shortly afterward, he encountered the craft, which had now landed in a field. Then an odd humanoid with frog-like eyes, wearing a jumpsuit, walked right up to him. Stephen swung a punch, missed the figure, and ran home in complete terror. 10. The alien with a mustache. On the night of December 1, 1977, Emilio Ruiz woke to find the bedroom of his home in Puente San Miguel, Spain, filling with light. Looking out the window, he saw a tall figure approach and peer inside. To his shock, it wasn't human. He screamed, and the figure walked away. Later, he discovered that numerous people in the town had seen unexplained lights. At the age of 25, I resolved to challenge Franklin Roosevelt's adage, "The only thing to fear is fear itself." After all, I'm a rationalist who doesn't believe in good or evil and who doesn't believe in superstition or the paranormal. I was safe inside of my own ground-level small inner-city house, which I was share housing with 3 other guys at the time. I was completely at ease and felt comfortable and knew with absolute certainty that nothing could hurt me. So at midnight I decided to test my own mind. I drew open my bedroom curtains, which opened to a moonlit dark alleyway. I turned my back to the window and sat at my computer. I decided to watch as many haunted house videos, ghost videos, creepy alien videos, and several disjointed music video animations from the band Tool, such as Schism, etc. I stayed in this prolonged fear state for around 3 hours. My hands were trembling, my stomach was churning, and I felt pale and cold. So it was time. I turned around and faced the window. To my disappointment, nothing was there. I turned on my bedroom light, took a few deep breaths, did a few jumping jacks, and shook out my hands. I felt my system returning to normal, and I had the thought, what a waste of time, I should really start moving a bit before going to bed. So I decided to step into the hallway and turn on the light. I walked through the dark dining room, past the 6-person dining table, into the kitchen, and turned on the light. I had a pile of dirty dishes I still needed to do, so I filled up the sink with warm water and started scrubbing them. At this stage I felt like my system had returned to about 80% normal, but I still felt a little uneasy. While doing the dishes, I kept looking up at the kitchen window. I was expecting to see a scary face at the window with a loud violin noise from a horror movie or something, but still nothing. My body had returned to almost normal, but my mind was still primed for fear. Sigh, anyway, time for bed soon. I was almost done with the dishes. That's when, in the corner of my eye, I saw something moving. A housemate? No, it was much shorter, a humanoid under 5 feet tall and slowly walking into the dining room. It made no noise at all and was indistinguishable from reality. It walked slowly past the dining table into the full light of the kitchen and got to about 4 feet away from me. Description of the demon: it had long arms. When it walked, its wrists dragged the ground. It had light orange or tan colored skin that looked smooth with very few skin speckles. It had short legs and a potbelly, and its belly was slightly wider than its chest. Its head was half the size of its entire torso, and its head hung in front of its body. It had no eyes, no nose, and no mouth. Its head was just a smooth, quite large, and elongated, skin-covered skull, which was perfectly counterbalanced by its pot belly and long arms and hands, which dragged behind it. I don't remember what its feet looked like, but its legs made up around 30% of its total body height, and its round belly hung around halfway down its thighs. Its knees were always in a bent position. It had no hair and was entirely naked. Less than rewinding a little, by the time I had turned my head, it had completely stepped out of the hallway into the dimly lit dining room. It walked from one end of the dining table to the other, which is where the kitchen began. When it got past the halfway point of the dining table, I knew what it was, and I said the words, "I'm not ready to see this. I'm not ready to see this." While I took 3 steps backwards and hit my back against the clock, which was hanging up against the wall. The clock made a clang vibration noise, and it disappeared instantaneously. I don't recall even blinking. About 2 seconds after it disappeared, I felt this sense of relief wash over my body and this sense of calm. I was in absolute awe and was impressed that I could hallucinate something so incredibly vivid it was indistinguishable from reality. From the time I sensed it moving to the time it disappeared, I estimate it took just over 5 seconds. I sometimes think back to this test of my mind and think, if that clock wasn't hanging on the wall, how close would it have gotten to me? Also, what if I had walked towards it instead of backwards? I don't know if I will ever have the spiritual framework to be ready for encounters like this. It could have touched me but didn't react to me at all. It really makes me grateful to not suffer from schizophrenia. Demonic encounters? I live in Oklahoma. On the outskirts of a decent-sized town, just before the country, there are plenty of tall trees within my neighborhood and surrounding my house. It all began about 4 years ago when I was moving into my house. My entire family was in my older sister's bedroom with her 2-year-old daughter. It was around 10 p.m., and we were visiting before bed, laughing and talking. And we took a picture of my dad holding my sister's daughter. Center of the room. Her face was blurred. We thought, maybe it's the lighting or the angle. So once more, we took it from a different angle. Again, my dad's face is perfectly fine. Hers is completely blurred. I don't mean like fuzzy blurred, I mean like a smudge of white over her face. Her face is simply not visible. It's distorted. So, that weirded us out a lot. We take a picture of only my father, in the original position. His face was fine. My niece is now in another part of the room. I take a picture of her. No face. No facial features at all. It was quite disturbing. Now, that was my first WTF moment, but I didn't immediately think, demons. I was skeptical. About a month or so later, my sister is starting to walk our family dog with her 2-year-old. She's just outside of our driveway, in front of a lightly wooded area. You can see through the trees to the next houses. It's not thick, and my niece turned around and said, "Papa." And my sister, puzzled, looks at where my niece is claiming my dad was. She sees nothing. My dog then began growling and trying to run back to our house. My sister at this point was totally freaking out. So she's asking my niece, "What do you see? Where's Papa?" And mind you, it's dark out. She has her phone light, but that's it. The dog is still freaking out, and my niece covers her eyes and starts screaming and clinging to my sister. My sister ran back into the house and was completely out of breath with a screaming toddler in her hands. We were worried, and she told me what I just told you. That was the beginning of that problem area. I never knew it would escalate the way it has to date. Fast forward a few months ago, I was sitting on a little plank of concrete outside of my garage side door, near the woodsy area. I was a grungy little 15-year-old, and I was smoking a cigarette. I quit that habit, BTW. And I had just gone through a breakup. I was crying all by myself. The time was roughly 3 a.m. I heard someone sneaking up, 2 feet. Heavy figure. About 3 yards to my left, coming towards me. I shined my phone light by it, and there was nothing there. So I just assumed I was hearing things. I continued my cigarette and kept my light on just in case. Not even 10 seconds later, someone or something sprinted towards me. But from the right side of me, about 5 yards away. I stood up quickly and asked who was there. Nothing. The footsteps stopped dead in their tracks again. So by this time, I knew I wasn't just hearing things, I knew what I had heard. I turned the patio light on. I felt a little more comfortable. Maybe I could see it approaching better. 15 minutes or so go by. I'm smoking yet another cigarette, yuck, I know, and I'm crying even harder than before. I had almost forgotten about the footsteps. I hear clear as day and in the most mocking way possible, "Boo-hoo-hoo, oh boo-hoo." At this point, I am shaking. I cannot see this thing mocking me, but it sounds to be just around my shed, about 10 feet away. I am terrified. The voice was in no way familiar. Completely foreign to me. I'm standing up, and I'm still crying, but out of fear, I hear a cackle so sinister and so unrealistic. Nothing, and I mean nothing, could ever recreate the sound I heard that night. I still think about it. Needless to say, I ran inside and locked every door. I didn't sleep that night at all. Moving forward, maybe a year. Sure, there were doors creaking open and shadows within the year. Sometimes you'd look in the mirror and see something lingering behind you only to turn around and see nothing. But that does not invoke the fear I felt when I was outside. 2 of my best friends are outside with me, at the end of my driveway. We're just talking and laughing like we usually do. The time again, roughly 3 to 4 a.m. Something heavy, it sounded like a full-grown man running towards us from the woods across from my house. We jumped up fast, and as soon as its feet would have hit the concrete driveway, the steps stopped dead in their tracks. Only about 5 feet away from us. We hopped in my friend's car without saying a word and went to sleep at their house. We only discussed it the next morning when we felt we weren't being watched by it. Now, my friends know my stories were true. They've witnessed it. I can't recall how long after that event this next one happened. Couldn't have been longer than 4 months. I'm with the original 2 best friends, and my third friend has no idea of anything we've experienced. She was a new friend, and we didn't want to seem crazy. We were all sitting in my garage with the garage door open, and it was a bit cold, so she went to her car in my driveway to get a jacket. She didn't even get to her car door before she came running back, white in the face, stuttering that a woman was screaming "Help me" in the woods across from my driveway. We 3 looked at each other because we weren't surprised, but we didn't hear it. I asked her if she was sure that's what she heard, and she said, twice, she screamed, "We have to help her." So, convinced a woman is being murdered in the woods, we grab tools and whatever we can grab in the 15 seconds we could gather, and we go barreling across the street, phone lights on. As we approached the woods, we heard rustling in the leaves. It sounded like a heavy bag was being dragged about 30 feet from us. And my guy friend yelled, "Where are you?" Because we could see through the trees but couldn't see any figures. Something hit the ground, something heavy. We're all backing away from the woods now. My new friend is crying hysterically. She thinks someone is dying. And all of a sudden, we hear something sprinting towards us. Faster than I've ever heard it before. We ran for our lives back to my garage, and we closed the door and locked every door that enters the house. They stayed the night that night because nobody wanted to go outside. My sister has moved out by this point into her own place with my niece. Later that week, I came home around 2 a.m. This was during the summer. I was out partying with those same friends, and my little brother, I think he was 12/13 of a year/0, was on the living room couch, wide awake. With every light in the house on, told me he saw something in the hallway, tall and dark. He was scared. And I sat with him and reassured him that it was nothing bad, it's here to protect us. All that bullshit, there was no convincing him he hadn't seen it. We've all experienced this thing. I woke up later that afternoon around 1 p.m., and every door in my house was open. Every door. I have a row of windows in my living room, with a sliding door leading to the outside, open. My dining room sliding door is open. The garage side door, which has been locked since the last encounter, is open. The door leading from the garage to inside my house is open. Front door? You guessed it, open. My brother was asleep on the couch. My dad locks the front door when he leaves for work and before bed every night. I always lock the door. Always. It was completely unnatural. Then I started getting an itch to pull out a Ouija board. Stupid. I know. I was young and wanted to find out who was terrorizing my home. So, my friend and I played in the room where it all began with the photos. We asked a few questions, and it seemed to be a good spirit, but I've read about it and know they're deceitful. I asked if it knew my name, yada yada. It spells out my name. So next, I asked if it could see me. It said yes. I asked next, can I see you? And it spelled out, LOOK. For about a year after that first session, I purchased my own board and played it often. I mean weekly. Maybe a few times weekly. It would, call to me. I don't know how to describe it. Addiction? Obsession? Possession? I'm not too sure. Maybe all 3. I soon contacted Zozo. I contacted Mama, Z, Zo, and Sam. A name I can't really remember every time I played the board. It seemed to like me and only wanted to speak to me. It requested others to not play and to leave time and time again. I can't help but think I really ducked up. I'm now 19. I still live in that house, though I pay half my girlfriend's rent and often stay over at her apartment. I never feel safe there, and my little brother is grown as well and still lives there. He says the activity is still there. I don't stay long enough to find out. It seems to be something in that area. To clarify, the entity was there long before I pulled out a Ouija board. Though it does not help, I definitely know it's not a human spirit. The sounds it has created are unsettling. I get chills typing this out. I want to hear similar stories. Maybe someone has something they'd like to share? I hope to find others who have incredible stories. I'm still fascinated with more complicated encounters like mine. I can't find anything on Google. Just the usual, my lights flicker or I hear my name occasionally. Nothing truly terrifying. A 38-year-old artist from Warsaw, who was on holiday in Shopee on the Hel Peninsula, witnessed this event. At approximately 1815, after finishing his sunbathing, he went to the campsite located approximately 1 kilometer from the place of rest. He was walking along a path next to the railway tracks when, after walking about 200 meters, he noticed 2 little boys running in front of him, approximately 150 meters away. They then disappeared into the bushes on the right side of the road. After a while, at a distance of 12 to 15 meters, he saw them standing on the path again. They were 2 identical, slim beings, no more than 1.60 meters tall, with light green faces and large, dark, almond-shaped eyes. Instead of noses, they had small humps with 2 longitudinal slits. Instead of lips, there were elongated slits. They wore green, one-piece suits. They stood with their feet apart, with their arms slightly bent at the elbows, hanging at their sides. They had dark boxes hanging from their belts, with yellow and purple cables and spirals coming out of them. From the chin, through the neck and chest, down to the waist, they had a golden-yellow stripe 4 to 6 centimeters wide. A mist enveloped them from their waists down to mid-thighs, stretching in a horizontal strip into the bushes. The frightened witness was wondering whether he should keep going or try to avoid them somehow, and at the same moment he noticed a silver object among sparse trees in the distance on the right. He also heard a telepathic message saying "Don't worry," and the beings moved off the path to the side of the road, making way for the witness. Walking slowly towards them, he found himself at a distance of approximately 1.80 meters, face to face with the creatures, and again heard the message pass, "Don't stop." The witness passed by with a thrill, as he felt some messages in his head about cosmology and the structure of the universe, which he did not understand but was aware of as if he had already known about these things before. After a few steps, he turned around, and the creatures were still facing him, and he didn't notice any movement or sound of rustling grass as they changed position in the blink of an eye towards the witness. After walking about 20 meters further, behind a slight bend in the path, when he looked back, he no longer saw the creatures, but to the right, on a dune in thick grass, behind a slight hump in the ground, he saw their vehicle floating about 80 centimeters above the ground. It was an oblong, flattened disc resembling a plum pit, about 5 to 6 meters long and 1.80 to 2.50 meters high, silver in color without visible doors, windows, signs, or antennas. When the witness got around the bend in the path, he no longer saw the vehicle or the creatures. Then the witness alarmed his friends on the beach, and together in a larger group, they went to the place of the incident to find any traces. They found 7 circular traces in the sand, 30 centimeters in diameter and 15 centimeters deep, forming an irregular heptagon. Later research by ufologists showed that the object must have landed in the same place twice. Moreover, the witness's account showed that 12 minutes were missing. At the same time, around 1830, another witness on the beach noticed that a pink lilac ball of light/mist was rising from the bushes, where the first witness was, higher and higher against the background of the serene sky, and soon disappeared, which was apparently seen by many people, but no one noticed it or paid attention to it. Aliens can be perceived as demons in disguise. I didn't believe in these things until I had met with other people who have had similar experiences as I did, but I used to see mirrors shake in the house, hear screams and demonic sounds, and see shadowy things and even a demonic face and figures in the house, and there are more experiences I've had, and every time I watch those UFO and extraterrestrial documentaries, I see commonality way too often than not. Someone on this channel mentioned psionic powers by extraterrestrials. What I can tell you is that demons have the ability to use telepathy without speaking, and you can hear them in your head, or sometimes it may ring throughout your body. Some can shapeshift into your loved ones, some can change voices, and some can have the ability to change into reptilian-like creatures and or some type of supernatural humanoid creature, I have seen. If you see paranormal experiences, they closely resemble extraterrestrial experiences. I don't believe in aliens, but I do believe in shape-shifting demons who want you to believe that there are other creations other than humans and animals and of this earth, except the universe and galaxies. During these experiences, the aliens don't say anything and disappear right when you see them for a split second. People are abducted when I feel like all that happened was their spirit was snatched to a spiritual realm, and these demonic humanoids talk to them blah blah and sent them back to their body, or they see flying UFOs in the air or humanoids in the air, very similar to demons and how they can manipulate and conform into objects and people. I am a recent convert to Christianity, through a supernatural experience. And I've been learning more about demons, and so my past paranormal experiences have been lining up with what I have been learning. Apparently I've been opening up demonic doors to have those encounters. They can be through drugs, lust, and other things. A little personal epilogue if you've made it this far. As soon as I became a Christian and started practicing the faith in real time, these demonic encounters stopped, and I've had instances where the demonic experiences came back, and I instantly exercised my faith. A church lady told me to drive them out in Jesus' name, and I saw these demonic figures, which look like aliens or humanoids. Some look reptilian-like or like animated characters, spider-like, big and small, tremble in fear and run away screaming as if they were on fire, and so that makes me think, are aliens just demons in disguise? By the way, I am in no way trying to proselytize, just sharing my experience and just asking for the fun of it. 9 truly incredible humanoid encounters. The UFO next door. On the night of May 5, 1952, NL Zone, a nurse, looked out the window of her home in Prospect Park, Illinois, and saw a massive, saucer-shaped craft with a line of portholes around the circumference. It hovered less than 100 feet away. Through the portholes, Anne was awestruck to see 3 humanoids. One was in profile and appeared to be busy at a control board. But 2 were looking down right at her. After a few moments, the craft glowed with light and darted away at high speed. Anne's husband arrived home the next morning from his night shift at the newspaper office, and after hearing her story, he said that 2 other people had contacted their office to share their sighting of a craft on the same night, just a short distance away in Round Lake. Investigating where the craft had hovered, they found that all the plants below were withered and dead, including a line of evergreen trees and Anne's prized rose bushes. Also, the paint on the side of the house closest to the craft was blistered and peeling. A feeling of being watched. On the night of December 9, 1960, Madame Delins heard her dog barking and glanced out the window of her home in Carignan, France, to see what was wrong. She took a double take when she noticed an oval-shaped craft the size of 2 cars landed in the yard a short distance away. Inside, through portholes on the side of the craft, she noticed movement. Someone was inside the craft, and she had the feeling they were watching her. Moments later, the object rose up and darted away. Little did she know that a few of her neighbors had also noticed the craft. Going to the site the next day, Madame Delins was amazed to find a precise circle of yellowed grass. French researchers thoroughly investigated the sighting after Madame Delins called the newspaper, convinced that the witnesses had seen something truly unusual. The most unforgettable experience of my life. On the night of March 20, 1967, Jim Rubble and his daughter Jean decided to take a drive to investigate weird lights in the sky that Jim's wife had seen near their home in Butler, Pennsylvania. After driving a short while and seeing nothing, they decided to pull over and wait. Moments later, their patience was rewarded when 2 strange lights appeared overhead. Almost immediately, the lights moved towards them, appeared to land on the ground, and raced to their car on an apparent collision course. Jim was paralyzed with fear, standing next to the car. Jean sat in the passenger seat, bracing for impact. She suddenly heard weird voices speaking to her telepathically, saying "Don't move" over and over. Without warning, just as the lights seemed about to crash into them, the lights disappeared, and standing directly in front of their vehicle were 5 strange humanoids. They looked human but had slits for eyes, blank expressions, and scarred-looking skin. The Dibbles fled in terror, and fearing that they had a demonic encounter, they went straight to their local minister for counseling. Jim later returned to the location but found no evidence. The town of Butler does have a few other intriguing encounters, including one with another very strange humanoid. The man on the flying box. At 5:30 p.m. one night in November 1974, Giovanna Sensili was at her farm in Case di Mordino, Italy, when her pigs and chickens began acting up and staring into the sky. Looking up, Giovanna saw a man in a tight-fitting, colorful, full-body jumpsuit straddling a floating box-shaped craft and staring down at her. A short distance away, a brilliant object hung in the sky, close enough that Giovanna could feel heat emanating from it. The man maneuvered around the farm for a few moments, almost landing on a nearby haystack, and then took off in the direction of a nearby cemetery. It looked to Giovanna that he landed there. She did not go to investigate and, in fact, kept her encounter secret, telling only a few people. But word spread fast, and a family friend turned out to be a well-known researcher who began an investigation. A robotic being. It was 1:30 a.m. early one morning in mid-September 1977, as Luis Almeida watered the garden behind his home in Gondomar, Portugal. Without warning, a bright light shone on him from behind the brick wall bordering his property. Looking up, he was shocked to see that it was coming from a 6-foot-tall, 3-foot-wide, gray, metallic, robot-looking figure with a squarish head and a light in the middle of it. Terrified, he ran inside to the safety of his wife and mother. His wife and mother were shocked to see him pale and shaking, and they asked him what was wrong. However, Luis was so traumatized that he couldn't talk about it. The day the ETS came to visit. On the night of November 2, 1977, 16-year-old Elsie sat alone watching television in the home of his aunt, located in Joaquim Murtinho, Brazil. Suddenly, even though the doors were closed and locked, a glowing, metallic Saturn-shaped object, 2 feet wide, entered his home. Moments later, a tall, human-looking figure dressed in a jumpsuit appeared and disappeared in his living room. Elsie followed the Saturn-shaped object outside, where he was met by the man and 2 other figures. 2 of the figures grabbed his arms and pulled him up to the doorway of a large craft that had landed in his backyard. Elsie saw other figures inside operating complicated equipment. The beings next to him began to communicate telepathically. They used a weird device to examine his hands. After a few moments, they lined up in a row, telling him that they would see him again, giving him a prediction that tragedy would strike his family. As the craft took off, Elsie attempted to seek assistance, but the trauma of the event rendered him immobile. Later, the tragic events occurred just as the ETs predicted. The aliens and the fishermen. On the night of February 4, 1978, 6 men, all fishing buddies, went fishing on Lake La Florida in San Luis, Argentina. After a few hours, they were stunned when a brilliant light lit up the area like daylight. Looking at the source of the light, all 6 men observed a saucer-shaped object rise from behind a nearby hill. A door opened, and a small, flexible ladder extended down to the ground. A tall figure came down the ladder and approached the stunned group. They saw that he had fair skin, blonde hair, and was dressed in a silvery jumpsuit. The man smiled at them and held his arms and hands out in a welcoming gesture. The men were too stunned to react. The man quickly turned around and re-entered the craft, which rose up and darted off so swiftly, it left a luminous trail behind. The men reported their encounter, causing a media frenzy. Later, police and the military investigated the case. Strange footprints where the being had stood were photographed and documented. Investigators also learned that residents in the area had seen the craft as it moved off. The singing extraterrestrials. As investigated by researcher Anton Anfalov, in February 1982, 2 men were exploring the monuments in the area of Borak, Russia, and taking photographs. Suddenly they came upon a large craft shaped like a loaf of bread. It opened like a blooming flower, and 2 tall humanoids emerged. They wore glowing jumpsuits and had pale skin, close-set eyes, and fine features. One of the men became frozen in place and fell into a daze. The other stood there as the 2 figures approached him and began to communicate in sing-song melodic harmonies. The witness himself was shocked when he answered them in the same tones, seemingly against his will. The witness recalls only fragments of the brief conversation that transpired. He managed to snap a couple of photographs before the beings returned to the craft, which departed suddenly. The other man woke up with no memory of any conversation but did remember the beings. Unfortunately, the photos came out completely blank. The main witness reports that his outlook on life became deeply philosophical. It was strange. One night in August of 1983, 4 12-year-old boys were playing in a forested area adjacent to their homes in Opole, Poland. Suddenly a heavy fog appeared around them, followed by a loud buzzing noise and a brilliant light coming from above. Moments later, a 150-foot-wide, bowl-shaped craft landed right in front of them. The boys observed 2 short, slender humanoids appear in front of the craft and glide across the terrain at high speed. The boys chased the figures, who disappeared into the forest and were gone. Moments later, the craft rose up, darting vertically so quickly, it punched a clean hole in the fog. The next day, the boys returned to the location and found 3 deep holes impressed into the earth where the craft had sat. Later, as an adult, one of the witnesses experienced 2 visitations in his bedroom by a strange entity. These 9 cases represent a tiny sample of the actual number of cases. But each case has unique elements, providing additional information about these strange visitors to our planet. There are now too many cases to explain away as hoaxes, hallucinations, misperceptions, or mental illness. The only other plausible explanation is that extraterrestrials are indeed visiting Earth. A demonic encounter. Years ago I developed a pretty strong drug addiction. I wasn't addicted to any specific substance, but to all drugs. I just loved drinking and doing drugs. It took me a few years to come to terms and realize I had a very bad problem. In 2009 I had an overdose and almost died. After I left the hospital, my parents put me in rehab. I did a 60-day program in Nashville and started to read the Bible and try and figure out what I could do to remain sober. I decided after I went to treatment that when I got out, I was to enter another program, kind of like a halfway house. It was in a house with 8 other men. We were to stay in this program for 1 year. I arrived at the house, and this is where the problem started. I have always been very skeptical. Never really believed in God or the devil. I have always just been a realist and been very scientific in that regard. I walked into the house. It was an old-style house, in the suburban area of Nashville. If I had to guess, I would say the house was from the 40s or 50s, so it's not super old. This location has housed addicts like me for the last 30 years in this program. I was shown to my room and unloaded my stuff. Once I got all settled in and got my stuff together, all seemed to be going in the right direction. I worked this program for about 3 weeks before I noticed anything going on. Each room had 2 men in it. I was on the top floor and had a roommate. We will call him John. One night I was lying in bed and having difficulty getting to sleep. I always sleep well. Drifting in and out of sleep, I started having some really dark dreams. Images of me dying and people around me dying. Being the skeptic that I am, I just got up, grabbed a drink, and went back to bed. This time falling asleep. The following few nights, things started to happen that I couldn't explain. Night 2, after the dream. I awoke suddenly, not sure of the time, and couldn't move. I couldn't talk, and it felt like there was something standing on my chest. I was completely paralyzed. It was pitch dark in the room, but I couldn't help but feel like something was in there with me. I couldn't think of anything but to ask God to help. This is really out of character for me being an atheist. I felt this horrible feeling of helplessness go away and I went back to sleep. The following day I couldn't get that thought out of my head. The feeling of powerlessness and vulnerability. I have never felt that way before. I knew of cases of sleep paralysis, and after some research, I determined that this must be what it is. Night 3. After thinking more and more about what happened the night before, I had a feeling of fear going to bed that night. I decided to lie in bed and read my Bible. I just flipped it open and was reading and trying to fall asleep reading the Bible. It started getting late, and my roommate was already fast asleep, so I turned the lamp off and put my Bible up, lying in bed, staring over at the direction of my roommate. Now the room without any lights and it was completely pitch dark. My eyes open, and I am lying there just staring into darkness. I felt pretty good and began to surrender to sleep. Just as I thought about closing my eyes, I looked down and in the dark could make out what looked like my roommate sitting on the end of his bed. "John? John?" I said to him, assuming he was not feeling good or something, and got no reply. I flipped the light on, and he was asleep. Thinking to myself that I was seeing things in the dark, I turned the light back off. Lying there in the dark, I aimed directly where he was sitting before. I kept looking, and as my eyes adjusted to the dark, I saw again this dark figure sitting on the bed. I asked again, "John?" And suddenly the figure stood up. The figure was completely black and about a foot taller than John is. What made me afraid wasn't the figure, it was the feeling I felt inside. In my head I could almost hear what it was saying. Although I couldn't hear any actual sounds in my ears, in my mind, this thing represented pure fear. There was an overwhelming feeling of dread. I knew in my heart that this thing wanted to hurt me. It stood there for a good 3 minutes, just staring back at me. Then suddenly, it started to creep forward toward me. At this point I flipped the light on and sat straight up in my bed. The room felt very still and cold. I could feel chills all over my body and felt like I was having trouble breathing. I slept the rest of the night with the lights on, and the following day I checked out of the program and went home. After I got home, I relapsed and couldn't stay clean. I finally gave my life to God and got clean 4 years ago and haven't picked up again since. I have always remembered that encounter, and after thinking and doing a lot of research, I believe it was a demonic encounter. I just discovered this community and channel and have never talked about this encounter before. I thought this would be an ideal platform to discuss this encounter. Thanks for letting me share this experience. This is as true as I can remember it. When I was maybe 7 or 8, I was playing in a big park/wooded area in California, which is not where I grew up. We were visiting family. Exploring, climbing trees, etc. My parents were within earshot, as was an aunt of mine, but they were talking and certainly not in line of sight. Saw a fox. Brownish reddish gold, pretty. I'd not grown up around there, as mentioned, and had never seen a fox before. So, in the manner of a curious child who didn't get to run around as much as he'd like and was hyperactive when he did and knew duck all about wild animals, I chased after it. It ran, but with no particular urgency, a good bit faster than me but not getting out of sight. It headed down a big hill with a fair amount of brush and a number of crooked trees growing out at angles from the hillside. I alternated between running down, clambering down, and sliding on my ass, depending on the steepness. At the bottom of the hill was a clearing, with a big tree in the middle, its trunk wider than I was tall. At the foot of the tree was a sort of lean-to structure, a pit dug into the ground, with sticks and branches and some cardboard leaned up around it, making a sort of tent-like enclosure. Like something a homeless person would make to get out of the rain or an enterprising kid would build as a clubhouse. The fox trotted into that structure, and I, who was still getting down the last stretch of hill, lost sight of it. Around the time I got to the bottom of the hill, a girl crawled out of the lean-to. She looked to be my age or a little younger. She had messy hair, I would love to say that it was the color of the fox's fur, but I can't remember for sure, with leaves in it, blue denim overalls, and no shoes. At that age, very few things had crystallized into seeming impossible yet. I checked the lean-to, no fox, nor anywhere I could see that it could have gone. The girl was standing there looking at me, so I asked something to the effect of, "Were you the fox I was chasing?" And she said yes, with a sort of proud aren't I cool tone. I asked, "Are you a person who can turn into a fox with magic?" And she said, "I'm a fox, but I can look like this too." I asked, "Do you live here?" And she said, "Yes." I asked, "What do you do for fun?" She said, "I play games. I catch bugs. I hunt mice. I hunt birds. Sometimes I get cinnamon buns from the vending machines." I'm pretty sure her responses are all word for word what she said, but it was a long time ago. And that was my curiosity satisfied. What can I say? I was a simple kid who read a lot of fantasy. I was like, okay. Want to see a cool rock I found and look for pillbugs? Or something to that effect, and we played together for like an hour. I don't remember all of what we did, but I remember that I found several cool rocks in total and she liked all of them and would stare goggle-eyed at each, that she could run way faster than me and jump way further and was great at catching bugs, which she did by crouching, then leaping forward and whopping her cupped hands down over them, letting them go after showing me that she was endlessly fond of being complimented about her running/jumping/bug catching prowess and would sort of pose and strut around when I said something she'd done was cool, and that she thought it was really neat that I had a book with me, a paperback edition of one of the Dark is Rising series, can't remember which, or why I had it on me in the first place. I think I offered to let her keep the book, and she told me that she didn't know how to read, but I might have imagined that part sometime in later years, I'm not sure. I know I gave her all of the cool rocks, and that she put them in the lean-to because they kept falling out of her overall pockets. Eventually my folks, who, it turned out, had been calling me for a while and were very worried to find that I'd gotten out of earshot, started down the hill towards me, via a more gradual roundabout path than the one I'd taken, still calling. I heard that my mother sounded worried and angry, was like, "I got to go. I had a lot of fun. Bye," to the girl, and legged it over to my family. I got scolded pretty badly and lectured on the importance of staying close enough to hear, and by the time that was done with, I didn't feel like explaining that I'd met a fox who could look like another kid and liked cinnamon buns and interesting rocks. I never saw that girl again. I'm not sure I even went back to that park/wood. If I did, it wasn't on that trip, and I now have no idea where it was, apart from the general Berkeley or possibly Albany area. It only occurred to me years later that I had a strange day that day. At the time it was just fun. Demons in a haunted ranch house. 4 years ago we used to live in the most haunted house we had ever lived in. This story recounts my experiences in a home where I spent most of my childhood and where many of my spiritual activities took place. The home was a residential ranch-style house. The house was built in the year 1965, and it was located in a cul-de-sac neighborhood. I was only 4 years old when we first moved in, and we moved out when I was 12 years old. I had 3 sisters here at the time. My older stepsister was 16 years old, my sister was 10, and my other stepsister was 8 years old, so we lived there for about 8 years, but during that time, we experienced one of the most horrifying hauntings anyone could experience. The following all began in 2011. But there is a backstory. My older cousin used to live there, in that old ranch house, before we did. And before we moved into it, there was a lot of wallpaper inside. The bathroom was this strange hot pink color as well, and the outside of the house was painted a yellow color. But one time when she was there all alone, she said she had seen a dark black shadow the shape of a man. After that, a chair she had begun to rock all by itself when she was alone, no one was in it. There was a different time when she had heard an old man coughing in the living room when it was just her and the kids there. After those experiences, she had burned that weird chair and packed everything of hers up and since moved out. And the home was all redone inside, All the wallpaper was ripped down and replaced with drywall, and the outside of the house was painted a gray color now. I remember when we were living there, it was like it was yesterday. When you walked through the front door, you were met with the living room, which was a red-maroon color. The kitchen and the hallway both had popcorn walls. The dining room was painted a yellow color also. Down the hallway there was a bathroom and a bedroom on one side and 2 more bedrooms on the other side of the hallway. One time one of my sisters had heard the toilet flush all by itself when she was up alone in the middle of the night. She went and looked, but no one was there, everyone was still in bed. My dad would often feel watched by something in the garage when he was working out there, because that's where he made his money. He told me that he would often see this dark black shadow in the shape of a man peek and sneak around. It would always look in at him through the garage doorway, in the corner of his eyes, and when he would turn and look to see who it would quickly hide and retreat back in behind the wall. He told me he would also see this shadow man pass through doorways inside the house too. He's seen this all day and every day until we finally moved out. The basement door was right in front of the garage door, and we used to have people living with us in the basement for a few years, and when they did, they had an Xbox 360 they would always play on, and when they were done, they would turn it off before going to bed, but when they would wake up in the morning, they noticed that the Xbox would be turned back on, despite them powering it off before, and my grandpa asked me years later if it was me who was doing it, but it wasn't. I was always scared to go into the basement, and so was my sister. Every time we went down into that basement, we both felt like something was watching us. We felt this strong and unwelcome energy, and it made us scared to go down there. Furthermore, every time I would go up the stairs, not going down the stairs but only going up, I always heard and felt something following me up the stairs. I would hear these footsteps and feel this strong energy behind me, but when I would turn around to look, no one was there, no one else on the stairs. For that reason, I usually ran as fast as I could up the stairs. My grandparents only lived there for 2 years out of the 8 years we lived there, so they moved out shortly after, and we were left with a completely empty basement. There was no one else down there, but my sister and I had heard something come from the basement one day. Me and my sister were doing homework in the kitchen on our computer. Suddenly the computer we were doing our homework on suddenly turned to volume 100 max. It startled both of us. We turned it back down to its original volume, and we were looking for what might have caused it. Suddenly we heard the loudest slam I had ever heard come from our basement. It was a massive bang, and it echoed and shook the entire house. Rattling everything upstairs, we were both crying and freaking out. We both ran to the garage where my dad was at the time, and we were screaming at him. We told him what happened. He went downstairs, and he threatened whatever might have been down there, but there was no one else there, he was completely alone. But what he did find was one of the cabinet doors jammed shut. He had to punch it back open, it was so jammed. My dad said he often remembers hearing noises coming from our basement, like things being moved and thrown. After my grandparents moved out, he said he often ignored the noises so that he wouldn't encourage any further activity. Once my dad and my mom were alone one night, they were talking at the time. It was nighttime outside. Also, there was a window behind them. Suddenly, when they were talking, they both saw a dark black shadow man peeking in, looking at them through the window from outside, and within a second, the shadow man had quickly retreated back in behind the house. My mother was scared, and her eyes were wide, she didn't know what to say. My parents and my sister had told me that they both caught me talking to the wall before, and nobody would be there, I would just be talking to nothing. I don't remember doing anything like that. One night my parents caught me doing it. My talking had woken them up, they watched me from the next room over, and eventually I just fell down and went back to sleep. Another time is when my sister goes walking down the hallway, she hears someone talking, and she looks into my bedroom, and she finds me standing toward the wall, talking to nothing. She walked away not knowing what to think. And I don't remember any of this. I spoke to the wall that separated my room from my sister's. She and I always heard knocking on that wall. It would wake us up in the middle of the night, scaring us and irritating our father because he thought it was us just playing around, so he separated our beds as far as he could from that wall to keep us from knocking on it, but it still happened because it wasn't us. After a while, he started to believe us. There was this strange and scary encounter that my sister had one time in the middle of the night. She woke up to the strong feeling that she was being watched. She looked out her window, and she saw this really old man standing in the middle of the road, just standing completely still, staring at her through the window. We asked her what the old man looked like, and she said he was very old, he was so extremely skinny, you could see his bones through his skin, he was super tall, and he was wearing really old clothes. He also had long, scraggly white hair. But the worst is that both of his eyes were glowing green. He was standing there staring at her through the window from the middle of the road in the middle of the night. She pops her head down and back up again to see if she was imagining it, but he was still there. But when she blinked, he was gone, and she never saw him again. She told us that the following morning, and we didn't know what to say to any of it. We were all pretty startled. A lot more had happened after that incident. I often remember seeing dark black shadow figures the shape of a man pass my bedroom doorway. I would see a black mass the shape of a man quickly pass in front of my doorway through the hallway, and when I would get up to look, no one would be there. And I remember seeing a shadow man peek into my bedroom at me in the corner of my eye through my doorway, and when I would turn to look to see who it would quickly hide and retreat back behind the wall. I would see it all night and every night until we finally moved out. There was this strange occurrence that would happen daily. It was that my sister's old room would always start to smell like alcohol out of nowhere, like someone was drinking really heavily in that room, and we all would go and search the whole room, but we found nothing, no trace of anything that was in there to cause that smell. One night my dad got up to use the bathroom. He was alone at the time, considering everyone else was sleeping. He went back to bed when, suddenly, he heard these footsteps going all the way down the hallway and stopping at his bedroom door. He got back up to see who it was, but no one was out there. He was alone, and he was pretty spooked after that incident. Another time is when my sister is in her bedroom sleeping one night when, suddenly, she gets woken up to tugging and pulling on her blanket. She looks to see who it was, but there was nothing there. She was scared. She woke up our dad, and they both searched for what it might have been, but they found no explanation for what caused it. One day we all went for a walk to go look at the Amish farms. We shortly got back to our home, and strangely we all found old, scraggly hair in my sister's bedroom. None of it looked like ours, and we didn't know where any of it came from. We were weirded out more than we were scared. One time my dad was up in the middle of the night using the bathroom as usual and got himself a drink. This time when he went back to bed, he heard this strange radio sound coming from my sister's bedroom. He was startled because everything in the house, including all the TVs, was off, and we didn't even have a radio in the house either. He got up to see who it was, and when he arrived, nothing was there, and no one else was up, so he just went back to bed. This one time I was in the house alone and our dad was outside. I was just being silly, goofy, and loud, just enjoying myself. Suddenly I heard this loud, old man's voice coming from our basement. It had screamed, "Get out!" I stopped, and I was very startled. I tried to listen to see if I could hear it again, but I heard nothing. I never told anyone about this experience due to the fact that I sounded crazy. So this is my first time telling this experience. One night my dad and one of his exes were sleeping with my dad, and the rest of us were sleeping in our bedrooms too when suddenly my oldest stepsister, his ex, and my dad, all three of them got woken up by this loud grinding noise coming from our basement. It sounded like a shovel scraping against concrete, and it scared my stepsister pretty bad. They went down there to see what it was, but nothing was down there to cause any of that noise. There was this time when my dad and I were talking to each other on the phone, and at the time, my dad was in the kitchen. Suddenly he hears this loud crashing noise coming from the living room. He runs in there, and he sees that all the photos that were on the living room walls and shelves flew off and onto the floor. He needed to pick them all back up. But there was this one strange occurrence that happened almost all the time. My mother had left my father, so he started dating other girls, but when he would start dating them, the spiritual activities would get more awful. We would start to see and hear the spirits more and more. So this experience happened during the first few days of us knowing my stepmom for the first time, and we eventually brought them to our house for the very first time, and keep in mind, we never said a thing to them about any ghost sightings around here. This all happened on the very first day that my stepmom and her family were all here. My youngest stepsister went walking down the hallway and into my sister's bedroom for the first time, and she saw an old man standing in the middle of her room, the same old man that my other sister saw standing in the road through her window. But he was standing inside the house, in my sister's bedroom this time. We asked her what he looked like, and she described the same features: really skinny, super tall, wearing old clothes, and having long, scraggly white hair. However, there was a difference. This time, both of his eyes were glowing red. But when she blinked, the man was gone. After that incident, things got worse. One day, our dad, and my sister are all doing homework in the dining room. We're all sitting at the table when suddenly, my sister goes flying out of her chair and hits the floor with extreme force. She was scared and hurt. She told us that it felt like something had grabbed her ankle and pulled it, while it also felt like something had pushed the chair she was in. We both helped her back up, and we were concerned for her after. We also didn't know what to do either now because you can't see it or touch it, so there's no defending yourself. We used to have neighbors, and their light used to shine into my sister's room. This is important because another time, my sister went to bed one night early, and we were all still up when suddenly she came screaming out of her room, saying that she woke up to knocking on her bedroom window and saw this dark black shadow mass in the shape of a man outside. Our dad went outside to go look to see who it was, but no one was out there, no trace of anything or anyone. That experience left her paranoid the rest of the night. One time my dad and my stepmom were in the basement taking photos, and at one point they took one in the basement bathroom. After they were done, they went to view the photos, and in the picture in the bathroom was this pure, dark black shadow figure in the shape of a man. The figure was peeking from around the corner of a wall in the bathroom in the picture, staring right into the camera. I remember this incident very well, and it scared everyone in the family at the time. Another time is when my dad and my stepmom were talking to each other in their bedroom one night. It was around 9:30 p.m., and you could just barely see outside. Suddenly, there were these huge 4 big bangs on our big living room window that faced out into our front yard. All the dogs began to bark and claw at that window. Both my dad and my stepmom went out to see what it might have been, and they were both very startled because it was so loud. But nothing was there, they were completely alone. Another time is when my stepmom, my dad, and my sister were all 3 sitting in the living room watching TV together. I was just in my bedroom at the time. Suddenly, all 3 of them saw this dark shadow man peeking into the living room from in the hallway. My stepmom said, "Look," just before the shadow man was able to hide and retreat back behind the wall. My sister says, "I thought I had just seen someone in the hallway, but it was pure black." All 3 of them went to search for what it was, but they found no trace of anything being there. Almost every other night, my dad would often get woken up by loud knocking on his bedroom windows. Every time he went outside to go look, no one would be there. This would start to happen around 12 a.m. midnight and end around 4 a.m. in the morning. The knocking would last for hours, and our dogs were always barking at them, but one night we had some company, and things took a turn. One night when our old friend was staying with us, she was fully asleep when suddenly she got woken up by knocking on her bedroom windows too. She then got really scared, so scared that she stayed up for almost 3 hours that night because she couldn't sleep and she was so scared. I had a pit bull named Bella who would growl and bark at the corners of the walls, as if she saw something we couldn't. Almost every day she would do this. One day, our dad suddenly heard his phone start to ring. He picked the phone up and answered it. On the phone was another man. My dad said, "Hello, who is this?" The man's reply was, "Who are you, sir? Did you call me?" The man asked my dad. Then my dad's response is, "No, I thought you called me." My phone started to ring, so I answered it. The unknown man then replied back, "No, I never called you. I thought you called me?" The man said. My dad didn't know what to say. He then told the man his name, and the man replied, "Well, I'm a paranormal investigator who travels around the world and investigates paranormal activity inside haunted homes." My dad was shocked. My dad never called the investigator, and the investigator never called my dad. Then my dad tells the investigator that we've been having a bunch of paranormal activity happen up here in our house for a long time, and then the investigator offers to come up and do an investigation if needed. They hit each other's numbers after that incident. But instead, a short while later, we ended up moving out of the home, and no investigation was launched over there. The whole inside of the house was all redone inside again. This time the whole interior was all painted a blue color now. The living room, the kitchen, and the dining room were painted blue. I wonder if anything else has happened in the house since we moved. We noticed that the home has been up for sale almost 4 times since we moved, as if people were moving in, and then, for some reason, they were quickly moving out a short while later. Thanks for listening.